Chapter 376. What? Yi Shiwen has completed the mission. The evil demon of the Eastern Continent also died at his hands. This is the first among several missions. Time flew by, day by day. 2 years had passed in the blink of an eye. It seemed as if time had slipped through one's fingers like sand. A period of 2 years was a short time for a formidable expert with a long lifespan. However, Yi Shiwen had been very busy these 2 years. He had undertaken the missions which No had wanted to pick. He had then been rushing here and there to complete them. A time of 2 years was enough for Yi Shiwen to complete those missions with full devotion. Yi Shiwen had completed several of these massive missions and had earned over 100 million spirit dawn. Everyone had become extremely jealous of him after hearing about this matter. However, no one dared to say anything because he had earned it by putting his life on the line. This wasn't an exaggeration. Yi Shiwen had made several narrow escapes during those missions. He had understood why nobody had dared to pick these missions once he had set out on them. The difficulty of these missions could scare a person to death. Even a Heaven's Pride level expert like Yi Shiwen had made narrow escapes during some of the mission. What could possibly be said for ordinary experts? Many old monsters were associated with these missions. Some had even cultivated for more than 700 to 800 years. Many of them hadn't stepped into the semi-sage realm yet, but their strength was countless times more tyrannical than that of an ordinary expert of the Legendary's great complete realm. In fact, one could say that their strength was very close to the tyranny granted by the semi-sage realm. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that escaping from the hands of those old experts hadn't been an easy task for Yi Shiwen, despite the fact that he held such incredible battle strength. Initially, Yi Shiwen had believed that his personal battle strength was top-notch in the legendary realm, if not in semi-sage realm as well. In fact, he had believed that he was strong enough to counter the strongest experts of legendary realm. However, he had understood that he had been too naive once he had fought these monstrous old experts. Perhaps it could be said that he had greatly underestimated the people of this world. Back in the day, these people used to be considered peerless geniuses of their respective regions. They may have failed to enter the semi-sage realm with the passage of time, but they were exceptionally tough and hard to deal with. What was the significance of Yi Shiwen's cultivation time in comparison of theirs? Yi Shiwen had sustained severe injuries during his first mission. In fact, he had been pushed to the fringes of defeat. He had relied on assistance from the heavenly source mirror to defeat the enemy in the end, and had thereby completed the mission. He had then come to realize that there's always someone better out there, no matter how good one thinks they are. This segment of the Legendary's great complete realm experts could kill him with ease, let alone the semi-sage realm. Yi Shiwen restrained his pride in his heart and began to conscientiously enhance his strength. It was rather difficult for most people to reach the pinnacle of half-step legendary realm or legendary realm. However, the legendary realm was a mere beginning for a majority of the ambitious experts, nothing more. If one had to transcend the mortal world and become a transcendent being, then this was akin to taking the first step into the temple of martial arts. Legendary realm was merely designed to lay the foundation. If one aspired to walk farther in the future, they would have to lay a solid foundation in the legendary realm. Yi Shiwen understood this fact. Therefore, his objective of earning big money from these missions had turned into a method of honing his skills and gaining practical experience. This was a very important transformation. The missions were divided into 3 levels. They started from easy and then gradually progressed to the most difficult ones. Yi Shiwen had started to treat these missions as a means to gain experience after he had experienced the first mission. The first mission had been the simplest. However, Yi Shiwen had a rough time while finishing it. He was very proud of his strength when he had undertaken these missions, and had reckoned that he'd complete the missions very easily. However, he had ended up sustaining severe injuries during the simplest mission. As Yi Shiwen gradually proceeded with the missions, the difficulty level gradually increased, and he started to sustain more injuries. One time, he narrowly escaped his fate, that too after he had sustained fatal injuries. However, the rewards for the missions became more and more lucrative as the difficulty level increased. Gradually, his strength started to increase. He had initially believed that his strength was at the peak, However, his strength still continued to increase. And Yi Shiwen had desired to accomplish this since the legendary realm was meant to lay the foundation. He would have boundless future prospects if his strength were to increase greatly within the legendary realm. Yi Zaiwen's reputation had gradually spread with the completion of the increased number of missions. He acquired a lot of fame inside the university before he had picked these missions. However, this fame was centered on the younger generation since he was one of the Heaven's Pride level experts of this session. Therefore, he was considered among the few new disciples who possessed outstanding strength. However, this fact remained restricted within the bounds of the younger generation alone. Many powerhouses of the older generation looked down on these Heaven's Pride level experts. These Heaven's Pride disciples might possibly become outstanding talents in the future. However, that would happen in the future. They were nothing at present. Many of the hidden, profound experts of Legendary's great complete realm could conveniently suppress these so-called Heaven's Pride level experts. However, many people had started to realize the fact that Yi Shiwen had managed to complete the missions which were originally deemed impossible. Therefore, Yi Zaiwen's reputation had gradually begun to grow louder and louder. In fact, several experts of the true Martial University hadn't taken notes of this matter early on. They merely felt that a desperate-for-missions madman had arrived in this new batch. However, he had received extremely troublesome missions which could only be considered as dead-end jobs for ordinary people. Therefore, Yi Zaiwen's reputation had gradually started to spread everywhere. Not as this session's Heaven's Pride level expert, but as an expert of Legendary's great complete realm with super battle efficiency. In fact, several people had noticed that there would be no scars on his body every time Head returned from a battle. In addition, Head complete every mission within a very short period of time. This indicated that Yi Shiwen wouldn't spend much time in recuperating after the mission's completion. Did that possibly mean that he won every battle without sustaining serious injuries? They were unaware that the Phoenix regeneration technique was so incredible that it could repair all injuries in a split second and restore Yi Shiwen to his peak condition. In fact, they had never thought of such a wonderful technique. Therefore, the majority of people could only guess that Yi Shiwen didn't sustain any injuries during the completion of these missions. This led several people to admire his strength. They were unaware that Yi Shiwen had barely scraped by during several of these missions. Some of those missions' targets possessed insane strength which went far beyond Yi Zaiwen's imagination. These profound experts of the legendary realm hadn't been able to break through to the Sage realm in their lifetime. However, they would have had boundless future prospects in case they would have stepped into the Sage realm. This was the impartiality of the Heaven's Law. These experts possessed outstanding talent and were qualified to make further breakthroughs, just like any other normal expert. In fact, they could have advanced triumphantly after the breakthrough since they could rely on the foundation they had laid in the legendary realm. There was no such thing as impossible in this regard in the world of martial arts. Therefore, nobody had dared to look down on those old experts. Every mission that Yi Shiwen completed in the early phases had proved out to be exceptionally difficult for him. However, he had accumulated the spirit dawn required for a breakthrough within a year's time. He had then made a breakthrough into half-step legendary 8th stage. His situation had improved rather considerably thereafter. Yi Zaiwen's fighting strength hadn't been the same after he had made the breakthrough in a half-step legendary 8th stage. In fact, he had speculated that his effective strength had reached the semi-sage level. However, Yi Zaiwen's cultivation level was far from the semi-sage realm. Therefore, there was no direct way to judge whether his fighting strength had reached the semi-sage level or not. However, he could faintly sense that it hadn't. But even so, his fighting strength had increased dramatically after he made the breakthrough into the half-step legendary 8th stage. In fact, it had nearly reached the upper limits of the Legendary's great complete realm. This had allowed Yi Shiwen to complete the missions with much greater speed. Yi Shiwen was convinced that his fighting strength had reached the cap of the Legendary's great complete realm after this breakthrough. In fact, he was under the impression that it would reach the semi-sage level with the next breakthrough. 2 years had passed, and Yi Shiwen had only been able to make one breakthrough. However, it didn't mean that he hadn't done anything of significance in these 2 years. In fact, whether it was coiling dragon palm, observing person scripture, buried sword secrets, or that one page of ancient god scripture, he had comprehended them all at the cost of a great amount of spirit dawn. Initially, Yi Shiwen had merely comprehended 1 or 2 moves of these techniques. However, many more were still left. Yi Shiwen had never been given the time to improve himself. Therefore, he had deliberately restricted the promotion of his cultivation during these 2 years. He had painstakingly invested his time and energy into building a robust foundation in order to prepare for the Sage Realm. In fact, he had used an overwhelming majority of the Spirit Dawn in his stock to comprehend these techniques. The 9 moves of the Coiling Dragon Palm, namely, Hidden Dragon rises from the abyss, Divine Dragon flings its tail, Dense rain without clouds, the shocking 50 kilometers, maybe jump into the abyss, Wyvern soars in the sky, 2 dragons play with pearls, Pearl Dragon fights in the wild, and Time to ride 6 dragons, have been entirely deduced by Yi Shiwen. The might of the Coiling Dragon Palm technique had reached an earth-shattering level after the deduction of all the 9 moves. In fact, it could now produce the terrifying might of an ancient martial arts technique. Yi Shiwen had learned several martial techniques, but his understanding of the Coiling Dragon Palm had always been somewhat suspended midair in comparison to the other martial art techniques. It wasn't extremely strong, but it wasn't very weak either. However, the Coiling Dragon Palm technique had transformed tremendously after the entire set of 9 moves had been deduced. Yi Shiwen wouldn't dare to say that he had deduced the original version of the Coiling Dragon Palm. However, the version he had comprehended was the most suited one for him. That was because he had comprehended it on the basis of his own insights. The Tyrant Body technique, Observing Person Scripture, and Buried Sword Secrets had also advanced by leaps and bounds. To be continued. Chapter 377. Yi Shiwen had only practiced the Tyrant Body technique till the 5th layer at present. However, his deduction of the same had already reached the 7th layer. This meant that he could make a breakthrough to the 6th layer at any time. Then, his gilded tyrant form would attain a completely different level of tyranny. However, even if the breakthrough hadn't happened yet, the toughness of his body had reached great proportions. This was owed to the continuous absorption of spirit energy over the last 2 years since it had strengthened his gilded tyrant form. His physical strength had also increased by leaps and bounds in these 2 years. It had become very different from what it used to be 2 years ago. There was a difference of cloud and mud between his previous and current strength. Yi Ziwen's Observing Person Scripture had been deduced to the 3rd layer, though he had been lingering on the 1st layer itself. He had condensed Jupiter and its satellites. However, this hadn't hindered Yi Shiwen in any manner. He had continued to deduce the Observing Person Scripture and had already deduced the upcoming layers. He had mastered the Buried Sword Secrets even though he had obtained it rather recently. He hadn't tested the last move yet, but he was confident that he had mastered it. However, he couldn't try that move since it could cost him his life. The Phoenix Regeneration Technique, Devil Wings, and other secret techniques had undergone massive improvements as well. One could say that the current Yi Shiwen was entirely different from what he used to be 2 years ago. He had progressed to the extent where he could casually blow away a group of experts of his level with just one punch. Several of his power techniques had been deduced 1-2. However, he hadn't seen a breakthrough. One of the reasons for this was that Yi Shiwen wanted to stay in this realm. He wanted to accumulate as much as he could. This would later allow him to advance in one fell swoop. He would then be able to rise to great heights in the future, and the accumulation within this realm had a direct relation to it. There was another reason as well. He didn't have enough Spirit Dawn. There hadn't been a single day when he wasn't in need of Spirit Dawn since the day he had obtained the mysterious space. Whether it was to have a breakthrough, or to deduce martial art techniques, or to practice and quickly master those deduced techniques, he must always have sufficient amount of Spirit Dawn. He had nearly reached the point where he was in need of an astronomical number of Spirit Dawn. There would have been no problem if his requirements were only limited for martial arts. However, the secret techniques and magical abilities he possessed were all world-shaking in their individual accord. Each could be regarded as a stunning heritage. This had led to a drastic increase in his consumption of Spirit Dawn. That's the reason he was always looking for missions, even though he had access to such a huge treasure house like the Hidden Star Peak. His annual income simply couldn't meet his requirements. In fact, his consumption rate of spirit energy could scare a sage expert to death. The amount of Spirit Dawn that Yi Shiwen had earned in these 2 years had gone past the 100 million mark. However, it wasn't enough. It could be said that even the very rich Hidden Star Peak couldn't meet his prodigal demands. The amount of Spirit Dawn that he had earned in these 2 years was more than enough for an ordinary person to cultivate his way to the Sage Realm of Scratch. Even then, there would be some left over. However, for him, it wasn't enough. Others would stake everything on their aptitude and cultivation time. However, their physique wasn't the best. Moreover, Yi Shiwen cultivation time was less than 10 years. So, he could only depend on the Spirit Dawn to catch up with those God-gifted geniuses. He couldn't think of any other approach to compete with those geniuses who had a far higher cultivation time than his. However, other people didn't know about this. They merely believed that he was a top-notch genius and a Heaven's Pride level expert. His growth seemed normal to them, no matter how fast it was. The burden of their expectations was Yi Xiwen's protective layer. He couldn't afford to uncover this veil. Innate talent and physique couldn't be stolen, but his mysterious space wasn't the same. If this secret were to come out, then it might draw the attention of every expert of the true martial world. If he had requested the Hidden Star Peak for such a higher number of Spirit Dawn, then he would have to explain why he needed so many of them. However, he couldn't afford to reveal this secret. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had decided to earn the Spirit Dawn on his own after considering it at a length. His mysterious space was the foundation of his martial arts practice. Even a slight leak of this secret could pose a great threat to him. So, he could take no chances. What's the next mission that Yi Shiwen is about to complete? This should be his last among the missions he had taken. However, it's also the most difficult one. It involves killing a genius of by Mo Jiao too, named Luo Tong Guang. And that man has recently risen to fame. This Luo Tong Guan has been very active among the geniuses that Bai Mo Jiao has recruited in this session. He had led an army of devils and had exterminated countless families. He's very hard to deal with. This mission is the deadliest among those missions. Even an expert of Great Sage Realm may not return from this mission, let alone Yi Shiwen. Luo Tong Guang is an extremely ferocious and magnificent expert among the newcomers in Bai Mo Jiao. He's a Heaven's Pride level expert as well. Most importantly, it's said that Luo Tong Guang stays in the underground base of Bai Mo Jiao all year round. Forget about Yi Shiwen. Even a great sage expert couldn't return from there. Bai Mo Jiao was a giant force, not just in the southern region, but in the entire true martial world. It wasn't inferior to the true martial university in any regard. Moreover, it was backed by the devil race. If computed, the strength of devil race was superior to that of the true martial university. But Bai Mo Jiao was the real enemy of the people of the true martial world. Every force of the true martial world was hostile towards it because of its evil interests. The experts inside Bai Mo Jiao were enormous in numbers. In fact, the experts of Sage Realm and Great Sage Realm were present in abundance. Nobody could complete this mission on their own, as far as the public opinion was concerned. Even if Luo Tong Guang were to come out in the open, he'd be accompanied by many Sage Realm experts. Nobody could think of a way to kill him. No one can complete this mission. Yi Shiwen will die if he goes there. It would be extremely difficult for him to get out of there even if he were to somehow kill Luo Tong Guang. It's simply impossible. However, it is difficult to say how many impossible missions he has completed in the last 2 years. Maybe he can complete this one too. These Heaven's Pride level experts have many hidden methods and cards up their sleeves. You never know. How do you say it's possible? An onlooker sneered and said, "This mission is impossible for anyone. Do you think those high-level experts of Bai Mo Jiao are blind or something? You think they want to spot Yi Shiwen? There's only a small possibility of success if several forces of the true martial world join forces to destroy Bai Mo Jiao. He will die if he tries to complete this mission. I think so too. I think that there's high probability that Yi Shiwen will give up on this mission. Nobody believed that Yi Shiwen could complete this mission. However, he had completed several missions that had been deemed impossible by most people. Therefore, everyone was in dilemma. Yet, most of them were inclined towards him failing in this mission. Several people would say that this mission was simply impossible to complete each time, but Yi Shiwen would still complete the said mission. The missions turned out to be very thrilling on several occasions, but he had managed to complete them in the end. Sometimes, the news about his mission would spread all over and would even reach the ears of the enemies since so many people would discuss his new missions. Sometimes, the enemies would even launch surprise attacks on him in attempts to ambush him on the way to the mission. Yi Shiwen felt helpless regarding this matter. He didn't have any method to shut the loud mouths of these gossip-loving people. He couldn't stop everyone from talking. He could only solve this problem with his tyrannical strength. However, this mission was different from the previous ones. The targets had possessed tyrannical strengths in the previous missions as well, but most of them were small forces. Some were even unaffiliated with any major forces. Therefore, they weren't difficult to deal with. The biggest problem in this mission was not Luo Tongguan, but Bai Mo Jiao itself. Bai Mo Jiao had an enormous number of experts. To kill Luo Tongguan in their presence was harder than reaching for the heavens. Even a great sage expert was said to never return from their lair. Therefore, nobody was optimistic that Yi Shiwen would be able to complete this mission. Even the people who used to talk in favor of Yi Shiwen every time weren't optimistic this once. However, Yi Shiwen had returned unscathed to the true martial university even still. He went inside the Merit Palace Hall. This suddenly attracted the attention of countless people. See, I told you, Yi Shiwen will give up on this mission. He wouldn't have come back alive otherwise. I know. Even an expert of great sage realm can't complete this mission. It's understandable that he couldn't complete it. It's not surprising why nobody could complete this mission for so many years. Almost everyone said the same thing unanimously. Meanwhile, Yi Shiwen entered the Merit Palace Hall, ignoring the popular discussion. Yi Shiwen arrived in front of a disciple at the reception and said, "I've come to report that the mission is cleared. I've killed by Mo Jiao's Luo Tongguan." Then, Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand into the void and grabbed the head of a person. It was a young man's head. Those deceased anger-filled eyes were glaring towards the sky. What? How is it possible? He has really completed the mission. It's incredible. It's not a fake, is it? It's not a fake. That face. I've seen it earlier in a portrait of Luo Tongguan. It's him. You don't know how many people hated him and wanted him dead. But how in the world did he complete this mission? Wasn't it supposed to be a mission impossible, even for a great sage expert? My God! A look of disbelief appeared on everyone's faces. This mission was extremely difficult. Nobody had thought that Yi Shiwen would be able to complete it. The disciple at the reception promptly took the head and raised it to verify. Yi Shiwen heard what everyone was saying, but he didn't say anything in reply. It might have been an incredible thing for other people. However, it wasn't impossible in his eyes. This mission was very difficult because of the presence of so many experts of Bai Mo Jiao in the vicinity of the target. It was nearly impossible not to alert them. However, Yi Shiwen possessed methods which could enable him to restrain his breath. He knew techniques to transform his appearance. He had successfully disguised himself as one of the disciples of Bai Mo Jiao. He had then become one of them and snuck inside. To be continued, there are 2 steps required in practicing a power technique. First step requires deduction of a technique. Yi Shiwen burns Spirit Dawn to operate his mysterious space to achieve that. The second step again involves consumption of Spirit Dawn, but this time he does that to pay the toll to enter the mysterious space. Once he is inside, he can freely practice the deduce technique and master it faster. In the last 2 years, Yi Shiwen has deduced a lot of stuff, but has yet to practice them. But the deduction of stuff increases his knowledge or wisdom, and it more or less like accumulation. Just like he had accumulated knowledge in Yuan School's library to have a breakthrough. By MO, Jiao equals devil worship religion or devil worship cult. Chapter 378. It might have been a difficult task for others. However, it was an easy task for Yi Shiwen. Moreover, his ability to restrain his breath to hide his true power and transform his aura had been very helpful. The devil wings that he had obtained by practicing devil arts had always emitted strong devil energy. However, his divinities would suppress and hide this devil energy. Otherwise, his whole body would have looked like a great devil. Therefore, disguising as a disciple of devil worship cult 1 had been a piece of cake for him. Moreover, the devil worship cult had countless disciples. It was difficult for people to know each and every one. Consequently, it had been very easy for Yi Shiwen to get mixed among them. However, Yi Shiwen had still remained hidden inside the devil worship cult's lair for a good 2 months. He had patiently waited to ambush his target. This had helped him in getting a clear picture of the devil worship cult. This eventually helped him in finding an opportunity to kill Luo Tongguang. Luo Tongguang was extremely strong. However, Yi Shiwen was stronger. Not to mention that Yi Shiwen had planned for 3 whole days before he had launched a surprise attack on Luo Tongguang. Yi Shiwen had eventually killed him at a desolate place. Then, he had left the lair of the devil worship cult with ease. This wasn't an impossible mission for Yi Shiwen. However, he had only been able to complete this mission because of his special abilities. Otherwise, this was an impossible mission for an ordinary person. In fact, even Yi Shiwen would have given up on this mission if he hadn't possessed such abilities. He certainly wanted to sharpen his skills, but he didn't wish to throw away his life in vain. Other people's discussions were stained in disbelief, but that didn't affect Yi Shiwen. Soon, the head that he had brought back had been verified. It was indeed the head of Luo Tongguang. True Martial University naturally had the methods to verify whether it was genuinely Luo Tongguang's head or not. An old man clad in white clothes came out from the depths of the Merit Palace Hall. One could tell from his clothing that he was a Merit Elder of the Merit Palace Hall. He arrived in front of Yi Shiwen with a Cosmos sack too. Everyone present in the Merit Palace Hall looked somewhat strangely at this Merit Elder. Yi Shiwen had completed a long-pending mission. However, this mission of legendary rank wasn't a very big deal in the end. Well, it wasn't worth a Merit Elder's personal attention. We verified. This is Luo Tongguang's head. The Merit Elder didn't mention how they had verified this. The Merit Palace Hall obviously had its methods. Otherwise, everyone would have tried to deceive them. The Merit Elder spoke with authority. This is the reward for the mission. 30 million Spirit Dawn. The Merit Elder handed over a Cosmos sack to Yi Shiwen. This was Yi Xiwen's reward. This mission had offered the highest reward so far. You must come with me, the Merit Elder stated. Yes. Yi Shiwen followed the Merit Elder and went into the depths of the Merit Palace Hall. The Merit Elder turned towards Yi Shiwen after they had ventured significantly deeper and said, I have specially called you here because there's a mission that only you can complete. Please tell. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands in obeisance and said. He wasn't afraid of these big organizations, but he wasn't a rash guy either. He didn't want to offend people for no reason. In fact, he might not have messed with the law enforcement hall if they hadn't shown unnecessary aggression against him. In fact, there were several people like Yi Shiwen who didn't know how to deal with the law enforcement hall. The law enforcement hall and Merit Palace Hall were respectively in charge of delivering punishment and issuing rewards. The law enforcement hall had ideologically played the negative role of a bad cop. Naturally, many people weren't able to keep up with them. The main ideology of the law enforcement hall was to use the power of law as they wished to control the disciples of the true Martial University. However, the disciples of the true Martial University were very rebellious. They couldn't be tamed that easily. A disciple of the Merit Palace Hall has turned out to be a traitor. His name is Zhu Tianzong. He's one of the new disciples of the Merit Palace Hall. He has been trained very meticulously by us. He has mastered several secret techniques of the Merit Palace Hall and knows several secrets of the true Martial University. He has betrayed us and fled away. And the problem is that we cannot disclose this matter in public. The Merit Elder continued. We're afraid that the other forces will try to find and abduct him if we were to disclose this matter in public. We can't let that happen, because that will pose a serious threat to our true martial university. We won't be able to give you a reward in the open because of the confidential nature of this mission. However, our Merit Palace Hall will remember you for this favor, regardless of your success or failure in this mission." The Merit Elder's eyes flashed as he eagerly awaited Yi Zaiwen's reply. Yi Shiwen pondered for a while. This was a big chance to earn the Merit Palace Hall's goodwill. This wasn't just a chance to kindle a friendship with a Merit Elder, but with the entire Merit Palace Hall. This friendship might seem ordinary now, but it could surprise him pleasantly in the most crucial time. At present, Yi Shiwen was in dire need of Spirit Dawn, but his need wasn't dire enough that he'd disregard others' plight. Moreover, he had offended the law enforcement hall. Therefore, it would be beneficial for him if he were able to develop friendly relations with the Merit Palace Hall. But the Merit Palace Hall has so many experts. Finding a few willing experts for this mission shouldn't be difficult. "Why did you ask me?" Yi Shiwen asked. This matter could be solved by the Merit Palace Hall's internal population. So why bother requesting an outsider? He's one of the top experts among the new disciples of our Merit Palace Hall. He has been trained vigorously by us. He has a wide range of contacts inside the Palace Hall. Since he has yet to get a clean sheet in the investigation, no one is out of the suspicion range. Therefore, it's quite possible that he may get the news about our chase and kill warrant. Then, it will be impossible to catch him. So, we can't have insiders as a part of this mission, the Merit Elder said as he smiled wryly. The probability of such a traitor popping out from their carefully nurtured disciples wasn't high. However, it had happened nonetheless. There was no other choice but to put down this traitor before he caused a bigger mess. In other words, this mission had basically turned out to be crushing one's own foot while lifting a rock to drop on one's enemy. That Zhu Tianzong possesses tyrannical strength. He is merely at Legendary's great complete realm, but an ordinary expert of the same level cannot rival his strength. An ordinary expert cannot take up this mission. Only you can. You're the most suitable candidate for this mission. The Merit Elder spoke in a somewhat contented manner. The Merit Palace Hall would train its disciples carefully and meticulously. Therefore, the mission of assassinating one such disciple couldn't be taken lightly. Yi Shiwen pondered for a moment. He couldn't afford to invest too much time on this task. However, it was a good opportunity to hone his skills. Of course, we'll send another team of disciples in order to divert his attention. You must act secretly. Try to attack and kill him as soon as possible, particularly before other forces find him, the Merit Elder said. Understood. Yi Shiwen nodded. Yi Shiwen left the Merit Palace Hall after he had received the mission. He calmly returned to the Hidden Star Peak. The Hidden Star Peak was extremely quiet at this time. It was certainly livelier than this on usual days. Yang Wenjun and Deng Shui Xin were undergoing closed-door training. Everyone had been undergoing closed-door training ever since the Hidden Star Peak had obtained the complete version of the Hidden Star Scripture from Yi Shiwen. There had been a cap on their cultivations because they had been cultivating the incomplete version of the Hidden Star Scripture. That was the reason they usually didn't dare to have breakthroughs. However, now there were no obstacles in their path since they had the complete version of the Hidden Star Scripture. They could have breakthroughs without any worry. The strength of the Hidden Star Peak would advance by leaps and bounds in the time to come. Big brother Huang Wuji had left the Hidden Star Peak again. The third brother by Jin Song was undergoing closed-door training in order to have the breakthrough into the Great Sage Realm. Therefore, there was no one on the Hidden Star Peak, apart from the wolf cub, who was usually scurrying about. Fu *ku. I'll bite you to death the next time you dare to call me a pet dog. The wolf cub cursed out loud in his usual foul-mouthed fashion as Yi Shiwen returned to the Hidden Star Peak on a beam of light. Yi Shiwen heard the small wolf shouting curses and couldn't help but smile. This small wolf hadn't changed one bit in these 2 years. His strength had improved unceasingly, but his appearance hadn't changed. His shape and size were still the same as before. The disciples of the surrounding inheritances used to call him Pet Dog behind his back. It was hard to tell when the wolf cub came to know about this, but when he did, it gave rise to long-term tug-war between him and them. The wolf cub was carefree, but his strength was no joke. No one had taken note of him when he had secretly entered the legendary's great complete realm. To be precise, he had recovered his strength to this stage. Yi Shiwen could still suppress him, but an average expert was no match for him. The disciples of those inheritances would often chase after the wolf cub, but they never dared to attack him. 2 years ago, the tyrannical Huang Wuji had warned other forces that whoever would try to bully the hidden star peak would have to face the consequences. Who would dare to mess with the hidden star peak's people after they had witnessed the demise of the ward Dead Star Peak at the hands of Huang Wuji? In addition, the wolf cub had learned to maintain his calm. He would remain cool unless something big happened. He wouldn't cause any needless ruckus. However, that one instance had spread his name as pet dog everywhere. Yi Shiwen didn't pay any attention to this matter. He didn't consider the wolf cub as a pet. Instead, he used to see him as an impudent and brazenly shameless friend who had a bad influence. He had never put a leash on the wolf cub or stopped him from going anywhere. In the last 2 years, the wolf cub had often mysteriously left the true martial university, and he had always returned with an enhanced strength. Yi Shiwen was aware that the wolf cub had an extraordinary origin. However, he could only sigh with emotion as Head looked at the wolf cub's breakthrough speed. In fact, his progress speed could baffle anyone. Have you seen such a handsome pet dog before? You must be blind if I look like a dog to you. The wolf cub spoke as he arrived beside Yi Shiwen. He was extremely charged up and found it difficult to dissipate his excess anger. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but laugh out loud. Earlier, only a few people used to call him pet dog. However, he had once created a ruckus in the neighborhood out of sheer boredom. Thereafter, the word pet dog had become synonymous with him. They would often call out, "The pet dog has returned to the hidden star peak." Then everyone would scatter like birds and beasts. "Can you keep quiet?" Yi Shiwen said somewhat helplessly. "Yi Shiwen, it's boring here. Why don't we make a big scene here for our own entertainment?" The wolf cub chuckled mischievously. "Do it on your own if you want to die that badly." Yi Shiwen didn't show the slightest interest in wolf cub's remark. Reckless actions in a place like the true martial university could get one killed. "So boring." The wolf cub curled his lips and said, "I'm planning to go back to the Demon Island soon. My cultivation has reached the pinnacle of legendary realm. I want to step into the sage realm, but the restoration of my cultivation is very slow here." Yi Shiwen felt like slapping him for that comment, but he was too slow and was thrown off by the wolf cub's next comment. "Good." However, Yi Shiwen didn't say much since this matter involved the enhancement of his strength. To be continued. Devil Worship Cult equals by Mo Jiao Cosmos Sac can also be translated as Universe Sac or Heaven and Earth Sac. But the term Cosmos Sac is more popular in the community, so I will stick to it. Chapter 379. Yi Shiwen had never put any restrictions on the wolf cub, so he let him go. The hidden star peak became even quieter after the wolf cub left. It had turned silent. Yi Shiwen went inside his small courtyard and laid out a barrier. Then he dived into the heavenly source mirror. He emerged in a boundless scarlet world. There was a huge blood pool, and a big figure was getting churned inside it. The star colossus had become much calmer in comparison to how it used to be 2 years ago. A lot of its power had been extracted in these 2 years. It wasn't enough to prove fatal for it, but it was sufficient to make it quiet. "Yimo, let's begin. I want to condense a blood slave," Yi Shiwen stated. Yi Shiwen had accumulated 50 million spirit dawn several times in the past 2 years. This was the amount that was required to condense a blood slave of semi-sage realm. However, he had never condensed one. Instead, he had consumed those spirit dawn to operate his mysterious space in order to deduce various martial arts techniques. However, this time he had earned 30 million spirit dawn at once, and he had enough spirit dawn to condense a blood slave of 50 million spirit dawn. So, he was ready to condense a blood slave of semi-sage realm. Yi Shiwen had taken into account that many forces would find out about Zhu Tianzong's escape soon. and several experts of the other forces were likely to set out in search of him then. He would feel a lot safer if he had a blood slave of semi-sage realm by his side. Yi Shiwen wouldn't have been so cautious if this mission had required him to deal with Zhu Tianzong alone. Endless amount of blood started to boil inside the blood pool. Then, magical symbols began to condense within the blood pool, bit by bit. The energy of that star colossus started to get extracted in a frenzied manner. A blood slave was about to be condensed inside the blood pool. "Ah, Yi Shiwen, you'll die a dog's death," the star colossus screamed when it felt large amounts of energy being crazily extracted from its body. Yi Shiwen didn't say anything. He sat cross-legged and started to float over the blood pond. Yi Mo was unceasingly chanting the secret engraving technique. Those magical symbols had begun to condense into a human figure. These magical symbols started to appear similar to body cells as they began to accumulate in order to take the appearance of a human. Meanwhile, countless spirit dawns started burning inside the heavenly source mirror. The spirit energy was unceasingly pouring into the mirror. The heavenly source mirror started to emit waves of scarlet light since so much spirit energy was being poured into it. The speed of the blood slave condensation process increased dramatically as a result. Yi Shiwen was unceasingly operating the secret method Yi Mo had taught him. The blood slave was beginning to get condensed, little by little. Semi-sage and legendary were two entirely different realms. If someone was at semi-sage realm, it meant they had taken half a step into the sage realm. If the Hodian realm, 1, involved tempering one's own body, then the Xiantian realm involved establishing a bridge to connect one's own body with the heaven and earth too. It was necessary to make this connection using the bridge in order to step into the truth realm. One could finally begin to realize the presence of various principles which govern the heaven and earth once the bridge with the heaven and earth was established, and one had entered the truth realm. In fact, these world principles were present in the mountains and rivers as well. They were present everywhere. They controlled everything. One could barely touch upon the existences of these world principles in the legendary realm. But the sage realm was a different concept altogether. However, one would have to be extraordinary in order to enter the sage realm. It was tantamount to transcending the mortal world. Everything in this realm was poles apart from the previous realms. One could begin to integrate the world principles with one's own body in order to form Tao principles in the sage realm. Moreover, a sage expert could draw out the power of the world principles present within his body and use it in his attacks. In other words, fighting a sage expert was like fighting against the world itself. That was why the experts of sage realm were so difficult to deal with. It wouldn't be wrong to say that only outstanding geniuses could enter the sage realm. It was very difficult to have a clear understanding of these principles, since they were intangible and invisible to most people. That was why there were many experts of Legendary's great complete realm who were unable to complete this step and remained stuck, despite having practiced for hundreds of years. Their martial power would continue to increase with the passage of years, and would reach terrifying levels. So much so that ordinary experts of the Legendary's great complete realm would pose no threat to them. However, even so, most experts failed to complete this step of transformation and remained stuck in legendary realm. Yi Shiwen wouldn't have dared to say that his accumulation of energy had reached the pinnacle. However, his battle strength could have reached the level of semi-sage realm based on his profound foundation and the heritages which he possessed. But that hadn't happened since he hadn't instilled the world principles into his body yet. He didn't have enough grasp or assurance that had able to condense a world principle within his body. It was important to comprehend a world principle to the preliminary level before one could attempt to integrate it with their body. That's why the dynasties of the past used to judge a genius by their innate talent, and not on the basis of the foundation of their body. That was so because a person's body foundation would be as good as useless if they weren't able to comprehend the principles, even if one's body foundation was so excellent that it went beyond the heaven's will. Therefore, a person with negligible innate talent was considered useless, since they'd never be able to cross the crucial step of comprehending and condensing the world principles. Of course, this case was quite rare. Generally, an expert with great innate talent was often adorned with outstanding body foundation. Yi Zaiwen's innate talent might not be the best out there, but he could be considered ahead of everyone in the younger generation when it came to the aspect of comprehending the world principles. All thanks to his mysterious space. As long as he had sufficient spirit dawn, he could continue to make breakthroughs. This step was the biggest problem in a blood slave's condensation. He must first condense the world principles on behalf of the blood slave before he could condense it. That was why he hadn't condensed a blood slave earlier, even when he had sufficient spirit dawn. He basically didn't have enough grasp to condense world principles back then. A semi-sage condensed principle was only a semi-finished product in comparison to a full-fledged sage condensed principle. But Yi Shiwen was still likely to face many difficulties. Yi Shiwen focused his mind and submerged into a deep meditative state. The loud roars of the star Colossus pierced his ears. Those principles gradually became clear to him once he had fully concentrated his mind. He could sense them in the surroundings. They were spread in all directions like spider webs. Every strand represented a world principle. Every strand emitted endless divine light. These were the very principles that governed the existence of the mountains and the rivers. They controlled everything in the world. If Yi Shiwen would tell other people about the scene which he had perceived in this moment, it would scare them to death. These principles would appear hazy to most people. In fact, ordinary people couldn't perceive them. It was impossible for others to see the principles spread throughout the sky like Yi Shiwen had just managed. Yi Zaiwen's real elemental energy spread around and began to capture the principles. Bang! With a loud sound, Yi Shiwen grabbed the first principle and pulled it over. Then he grabbed the second principle, then the third, and so on. He grabbed more and more principles with the help of his real elemental energy. These principles then began to condense together. Yi Shiwen had forcefully gathered these principles, but he hadn't fused them. Therefore, the resultant condensed principle could only be considered as a semi-sage principle. If they were to be fused properly, the resultant principle would be considered a sage realm principle. However, this step was an enormous victory for Yi Shiwen in itself. A faint smile appeared on his face. Yi Shiwen continued to condense more and more Tao principles of the semi-sage realm. His speed had increased tremendously after he had condensed the first Tao principle. It was hard to tell how long after. Bang! Suddenly an explosion occurred in the blood pond. Then, a bloody silhouette appeared in the blood pond. It was exuding the aura of semi-sage realm from its body. Ha ha ha, Yi Shiwen, we've finally condensed the blood slave. The soul of the star Colossus is indeed worthy of praise. The body of this blood slave contains more than 200 Tao principles. Yimo laughed out loud. Yi Shiwen also smiled faintly. Different experts of semi-sage realm could accommodate different number of Tao principles. The ones at the initial stage of the semi-sage realm could accommodate almost 100 Tao principles. One could accommodate almost 300 Tao principles in the intermediate stage. And one could accommodate more than 500 Tao principles at the later stages. An expert with a higher number of Tao principles would be more powerful and more difficult to deal with. This blood slave had just taken birth, but its fighting strength wasn't bad. The star Colossus was still locked up inside the blood pond, but it had become a lot quieter. Lots and lots of its energy and essence had been forcefully extracted. This had weakened it. Yi Shiwen knew that he could do a lot of things with this semi-sage level blood slave at his disposal. The strength of his arsenal would increase by leaps and bounds once he had condensed several blood slaves. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't like Yi Mo's former master. He didn't plan to build an army of blood slaves, nor did he have the required amount of resources to pull that off. So, it was none of his concern. Yi Zaiwen's comprehension of the principles had increased since he had condensed so many principles for his blood slave. So, condensing principles for himself would naturally be a piece of cake for him. His fighting strength could reach the semi-sage level in the next breakthrough. Yi Shiwen was planning to undergo closed-door training after he had completed this mission. He intended to make a breakthrough into the half-step legendary 9th stage. As far as Zhu Tianzong was concerned, Yi Shiwen was confident that it wouldn't be a big issue since he now had the assistance of his very own blood slave. Come, let's go find that traitor. Southern Wasteland was a vast expanse of wasteland. It stretched across a vast area in the southern region. It had hundreds of thousands of great mountains, wherein lurked ominous beasts and predatory birds. It was regarded as an ominous land. It was far, far away from civilization. It was home to a massive tribal group who had lived there forever. These tribal people belonged to the so-called barbarian race. Yi Shiwen followed Zhu Tianzong as per the information he had received from the Merit Palace Hall. Yi Shiwen had missed him by a little on the way, and this happened several times. Zhu Tianzong was a very cunning fellow. He never stayed at one place for long. That was why Yi Shiwen had missed his targets several times by now. He had continued to chase Zhu Tianzong towards the south and had ventured into the southern wasteland. The true martial world had 4 wastelands on the periphery, apart from the 5 regions located in the middle of the continent. These wastelands were home to barbarians who were strong, sturdy, and incomparably valiant. The barbarian race was a group of mysterious and enigmatic people. The True Martial University had fought with the barbarians many times when it used to rule the entire True Martial world. One would come across 4 seas if one were to go past these 4 wastelands. There was a sporadic distribution of countless islands in these seas. These islands were ruled by several different forces. A complex power structure existed in this area. It was intertwined, yet spread out. The True Martial University had no direct jurisdiction over this area even during its most flourishing time. There were some mysterious and formidable forces in the southern wasteland. They weren't one bit inferior to the Colossus forces of 5 central regions. The experts of True Martial University, Xianyuan Palace Hall, and EC's Muddy Sky Island would compete with each other in the martial arts competition which was to be held 3 years later. The southern barbarians of Fire Cloud Cave would also arrive to compete as one of the major forces. To be continued. Hotian Realm, Xiantian Realm, Truth Realm, Legendary Realm, Sage Realm, Great Sage Realm Heaven, and Earth equals World. Chapter 380. The Southern Wasteland was a forbidden area, even for the people of Southern Region. A majority of people didn't know much about it. Many people used to call it Southern Barbaric Land. The people of the Southern Wasteland were called barbarian people or simply barbarians. The barbarians didn't have very friendly relations with the people of the Southern Region. The two sides were always fighting a battle for survival with each other. Fierce wars would often break out between the two sides. Small skirmishes were an everyday matter. Yi Shiwen hadn't anticipated that He had entered the Southern Wasteland during his pursuit of Zhu Tianzong. He had arrived in the vicinity of the 100,000 mountains whilst immersed in this desolate region's thoughts. Yi Shiwen opened his devil wings and flew into the Southern Wasteland. He entered the depths of 100,000 mountains after flying for more than a day. Wow, I never thought that I would see a northerner here. Yi Shiwen was flying in the sky when he suddenly heard a puzzled voice. Yi Shiwen immediately stopped, and sure enough, there appeared a few ferocious-looking barbarian people not far from him in the sky. There were a total of 5 people. All of them were experts of Legendary's great complete realm. They were headed by a man with restrained aura, but profound martial power. He was an extremely profound expert of Legendary's great complete realm. He looked more than 30 years old and approximately 2 meters tall. He had rough facial features and bronze-colored skin. His bronze skin looked lustrous and was glowing brightly in the sunlight. Our elders have asked us to wait here and see to it that no northerner passes from here. And if someone does appear, then we must pursue and kill them. Hee boy. Blame your bad luck for putting you in this situation. The chief barbarian grinned fiendishly as he gazed at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't want to engage them. He was in a hurry and must keep chasing after Zhu Tianzong. However, the words of the chief barbarian had made him stop. He felt, could these people have some kind of a relation with Zhu Tianzong? We're so damn lucky. The Northerners often keep big treasures on their body. The spoils of war will be our property. A barbarian expert laughed out loud and said, "Humph, you're courting death. It'll kill you all, and then search each of your divine sense for information, regardless of your relation with Zhu Tianzong." Yi Shiwen made his decision. It was clear from the thought process of these barbarians that they were up to no good. "Attack!" The chief barbarian shouted loudly. The other barbarians launched attacks one after another. They used their brute strength and launched themselves towards Yi Shiwen. A red-colored flaming big hand slapped across the sky. Fire Cloud's falling sky hand. "Are you the people of Fire Cloud Cave?" Yi Shiwen recognized this signature martial technique that was practiced by nearly every disciples of the Fire Cloud Cave. However, the degree of power unleashed by this move varied from individual to individual, depending on their ability. Fire Cloud's falling sky hand, when displayed by the Lord of Fire Cloud Cave, could even split the stars and the moon. Boy, quite the strong eyesight you've got there. However, you're going to die soon." The chief barbarian grinned fiendishly. These experts of the Legendary's Great Complete Realm had shot their Fire Cloud Sky falling hand attacks in unison. These attacks condensed into a giant net which blotted out the sky and covered the earth as it rushed towards Yi Shiwen. "You're really courting death. Today, no one can save you." Yi Shiwen sneered and said. He shot his palm without any hesitation, and his golden divinities began to boil. A golden dragon emerged from the golden divinities. It roared as it looked towards the sky, and then rushed forward. That inescapable giant net was ripped apart by that golden dragon in a flash. It seemed as if the world had lost its color. Those fire-colored hands disappeared without a trace. Bang! 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 Those barbarians spouted blood from their mouths as they were sent flying by Yi Shiwen's attack. "You!" That chief barbarian looked at Yi Shiwen with disbelief in his eyes. He could clearly see that Yi Shiwen was merely an expert of half-step legendary 8th stage. That was why he had never expected that a single move of Yi Shiwen would be so incredible. However, he had realized that even his own strength, that he was intensely proud of, was simply nothing in front of Yi Shiwen's. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate. He shot his golden big hand. Those barbarians got grabbed at once, just like being enshrouded by a massive golden cloud. Bang! 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 These sturdy barbarians of Legendary's Great Complete Realm were then crushed by Yi Shiwen. Then he extracted their divine sense and probed their memories. They might have caused some trouble for Yi Shiwen if he had come across them 2 years ago. Particularly, that chief barbarian wouldn't have been one bit inferior to Yi Shiwen 2 years ago. However, they were no match for the current Yi Shiwen. He had easily clutched them to death. After probing through the divine sense of these powerhouses, Yi Shiwen found out that they were providing support to Zhu Tianzong by helping him in his escape. They were also responsible for taking care of any enemy pursuers. In addition, Zhu Tianzong also had the support of sage experts. Zhu Tianzong wasn't a traitor who had defected from the true martial university. He had always been an undercover agent of Fire Cloud Cave. However, it was still uncertain for what reason he had been summoned back. Otherwise, he could have remained hidden in the true martial university. Yi Shiwen strongly felt that this matter was becoming more and more complex. It might go far beyond his imagination. He must penetrate deep inside the Fire Cloud Cave to kill Zhu Tianzong. The dangers involved wouldn't be small either. Yi Shiwen thought for a moment. He felt that he must complete this mission. However, he couldn't just rush in casually since many experts of the Fire Cloud Cave would be present there. The best way was to disguise as a disciple of the Fire Cloud Cave. Fortunately, he had killed a few already, and they all knew the signature technique of the Fire Cloud Cave. It was impossible for other people to learn an entirely new martial art in such a short time. However, Yi Shiwen could continue to operate the mysterious space to deduce any technique as long as he had sufficient spirit energy in his possession. Yi Shiwen gradually unfolded the secrets of Fire Cloud Cave's core martial art, named Desolate Divine Fire Cloud Technique after he had poured a great amount of spirit dawn inside the mysterious space. It no longer remained a secret in Yi Ziwen's eyes. Several other mysterious techniques had also appeared inside Yi Ziwen's mind. Yi Shiwen had mastered several of their secret techniques in less than half an hour. Yi Ziwen's body also started to emit the typical aura of barbarians. Yi Shiwen continued to operate the restraining breath technique to not just modify his aura but also his appearance. His appearance began to gradually transform from delicate to rough. His height also increased significantly. Plus, his body was also emitting the aura which was very similar to that of a southern barbarian after having learned the Desolate Divine Fire Cloud technique. Yi Shiwen had come to know from the memories of those disciples of Fire Cloud Cave that several experts of semi-sage and sage realm were stationed at some distance to ambush the pursuers. These experts were strong enough to possibly intercept the chasing experts of the true martial university who would soon be arriving here. After knowing this, Yi Shiwen would naturally not walk into their trap foolishly. He would circle around them to go forward. Yi Shiwen had successfully changed his appearance into that of a barbarian expert. After that, he flew all the way along the 100,000 mountains. These mountains were more chaotic on contrary to Yi Ziwen's imagination. Battles were taking place everywhere. The frequency of coming across a fight here was much higher than it was in the southern region. The division of power in the southern wasteland was quite different from how it was in the southern region. The tribal groups were basically divided into units in the southern wasteland. These groups were affiliated to the major forces. The war between two tribal groups was exceptionally cruel. It was far more brutal than the war between two countries in the southern region. The war between two countries would often take place for overthrowing the opposite regime. However, the war between two tribal groups would often take place to completely eradicate the opposite tribal group. Everyone in the lost tribe would get massacred brutally. This was more intense and brutal and was fundamentally different from civilized wars that took place between countries. These tribal groups would often act as the subordinate of various forces of the southern wasteland, especially when a war broke out between two forces. He was ambushed several times by the disciples of 100 Barbarians Cave while he was flying towards his destination. 100 Barbarians Cave was a major force of southern wasteland. 100 Barbarians Cave was one of the several major forces that operated in the southern wasteland. It might even be stronger than Fire Cloud Cave. Both the forces could be considered as arch-rivals. These two forces had always been hostile towards each other and were constantly indulged in small and big skirmishes. Yi Shiwen discovered that 100 Barbarians Cave and Fire Cloud Cave had been continuously fighting since last 2 years from the divine sense of the disciples of 100 Barbarian Cave whom he had killed. Yi Shiwen had disguised himself as a disciple of the Fire Cloud Cave. It was too obvious from his aura. Consequently, he had to face the ambushes of the experts of 100 Barbarian Cave again and again. He was ambushed by a lot of tyrannical experts, but they all got slaughtered by him in the end. After obtaining this information, Yi Shiwen had to admit that the situation of the southern barbarians was even more chaotic than he had previously imagined. This scale of war would never break out in the 5 regions of the continent, since people were wise enough to consider properly before waging a war on others. However, the temperament of these barbarians was straightforward. These stubborn barbarians didn't use logic before starting a war. Even one bad remark was enough to incite a war between tribes. Once upon a time in the past, 2 enormous forces had indulged in a war because their respective subordinate tribes had an argument over the control of water supply. And that fight between 2 tribes had finally evolved into a deadly war between 2 major forces. However, such chaotic situation was favorable for Yi Shiwen. He could easily fish in troubled waters. The more chaotic the situation, the easier it would be for him to complete this mission. Yi Shiwen flew for half a day and went deeper into the 100,000 mountains. He was using the memories of the disciples of 100 Barbarians Cave and Fire Cloud Cave as a guide to proceed. Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid of getting lost. Far away, a dozen or so barbarian warriors were struggling in a fight against an ominous beast. Yi Shiwen saw that it was a tiger-like ominous beast. Its whole body was covered with long bones that had grown out of its body and had interlocked into a complex structure. This complex bone structure covered its body on the outside, while its skin and flesh were protected on the inside. It was about 10 meters tall. It was a kind of bone beast found commonly in these 100,000 great mountains. It was very rare to find a bone beast in the outside world. However, they were in abundance in these mountains. Yishuan had also seen a lot of them on his way here. Those barbarian warriors were headed by two people. One was a man, and the other was a woman. Both were martial warriors. The man had muscular build and looked fierce. The woman looked pretty from her facial features. Her complexion was slightly tanned. The women of Southern Wasteland didn't look fierce and robust like their male counterparts. They could be called wild beauties. These two people were extremely profound warriors of Legendary's great complete realm. They had encircled this bone beast from all sides along with their several barbarian subordinates. Their subordinates were also at Legendary's great complete realm. However, they were being forced to retreat by this bone beast gradually, as it was very difficult to break its bones. To be continued. Chapter 381. The bones of these ominous bone beasts were their strongest defensive layer. It was very difficult to break them. These experts of the Fire Cloud Cave bombarded the body of that bone beast with their strongest martial techniques, mostly with the fire cloud's falling sky hand. However, their attacks could barely break its exoskeleton. In fact, their efforts went in vain because its broken bones instantly grew back. This beast was very difficult to deal with. Arg! The bone beast roared. The bones from its body were ejected just like long arrows and pierced through the vast sky. Two barbarian warriors didn't get enough time to evade, and the long bone arrows penetrated their bodies. They were nailed to the ground, and their blood splashed everywhere. This caused a rapid loss in their vitality. Damn it! I didn't expect this bone beast to be so ferocious. It seems it'll enter the semi-sage realm soon. The woman, who was one of the two barbarians leading this team, clenched her teeth and said, perhaps engaging this bone beast was their biggest mistake. The experts in the southern region would often kill demon beasts to obtain their demon cores, or to obtain various other kinds of materials from their bodies. However, their purpose was entirely different from that of the experts of the southern wasteland. These people used to kill these demon beasts for food. However, there weren't many warriors in this region, and the 100,000 mountains was their only reputable source of food. The remnant majority of land in the southern Westland was barren and unsuitable for farming. Therefore, there was always shortage of food. Their only source of food was these ominous beasts found in the 100,000 mountains. Only the most powerful warriors could catch enough prey to ensure the survival of their entire tribe. In the southern region, an expert was considered as a powerhouse by ordinary people. Such experts were considered strong beings in the eyes of the common people. They supposedly belonged to a higher social class and preferred to stay aloof to focus on their cultivation. However, in the southern wasteland, warriors were considered the backbone of the entire race. The survival of the entire barbarian race was dependent on these warriors. In other words, the status of warriors in the southern wasteland was far above that of the experts in the southern region. Yishuan realized that the bone beast had begun to ascend towards the semi-sage realm. Its aura had begun to transform into the aura of a semi-sage beast. No wonder that these people couldn't cope with it. Yishuan thought for a moment. Suddenly, an idea sprouted inside his mind. He shouted, "Brothers and sisters, I'm coming to help you." Yishuan spoke and rushed forward. He shot the fire cloud's falling sky hand move. It swept towards that bone beast to clutch it, just like a flaming cloud. The bone beast promptly faced upwards and roared as it saw Yi Zaiwen's attack approach it. The huge bones on its body ejected and darted towards the incoming fire cloud's falling sky hand. Bang! The fire cloud's falling sky hand and the sword-like long bones collided in midair. The bone swords were crushed into pieces. They couldn't resist the might of Yi Zaiwen's attack. Bang! The so-called invincible bone beast was bombarded by Yi Zaiwen's fire cloud's falling sky hand. Its body was disintegrated and turned to blood fog. The robust and strong exoskeleton, it was so proud of, couldn't resist the blow of Yi Zaiwen's gilded tyrant form. It was pulverized in the blink of an eye. The warriors of the Fire Cloud Cave were shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw how the bone beast was unable to block a single move of Yi Zaiwen's and was killed in an instant. It had been no match for Yi Shiwen. They, on the contrary, had been forced to retreat. They had never anticipated that this frail-looking person would turn out be so powerful. Yi Zaiwen's height had increased significantly in this disguised form. However, his build was still somewhat lacking as per the standards of barbarian people. He would only be considered a little man by them. The strength of these barbarian people was often distinguished on the basis of their size. A warrior with a bigger stature would often turn out to be more ferocious and powerful. These barbarian people were elite warriors. They were well-versed in the art of war. They naturally weren't shallow people. However, this millennia-old stereotype had always run strong among them. The male warrior who was leading the team regained his composure. He promptly stepped forward and spoke. On behalf of the entire Yang tribe, I, Yang Hong, am deeply grateful to you for saving our lives, brother. You've done us a big favor. Yi Shiwen didn't find the names and surnames of these people strange. The 4 wastelands and the 5 regions were often engaged in war. But one had to admit that the 5 regions were culturally advanced than the 4 wastelands. The barbarian tribes of the 4 wastelands used the same names and surnames which were prevalent in the 5 regions. The stronger barbarians would take high-class surnames for themselves. There's no need to thank me. Aren't we the disciples of the same cave? We should stick together and help each other? Yi Shiwen laughed out loud in a straightforward manner. The aura of barbarians was overflowing from his body. He appeared like a barbarian person. Yi Shiwen exchanged greeting with them and came to know that these warriors belonged to the so-called Yang tribe. They had come out hunting for the sake of gathering rations for their tribe. They were the strongest warriors of their tribe. Their entire tribe would have been razed to the ground if they had died. Their tribe wouldn't have been exterminated by the ominous beasts, but by the other tribes. Therefore, Yang Hong's gratitude was genuine and understandable. Yi Shiwen wanted to take advantage of the Yang tribe to sneak into the Fire Cloud Cave. The Yang tribe had always maintained good relations with the Fire Cloud Cave. However, a sudden burst of rainbow light shone in the sky before Yi Shiwen could speak about the Fire Cloud Cave, and a barbarian appeared treading on it. He arrived in front of the warriors of the Yang tribe. He looked arrogantly towards everyone and said, I have brought an order from young Master Sure. He wants the experts of the Yang tribe to proceed towards the River Agate Mountain at once. There's an important task that needs your cooperation. Then, that barbarian expert turned around. He rode on the rainbow without any delay and disappeared before everyone's eyes. It's Sure Ji Ming again. The female leader gritted her teeth and spoke. Yi Shiwen had come to know that this female warrior was Yang Hong's younger sister. Her name was Yang Na. Something bad happens every time he summons us. I don't know how many of our Yang tribe's warriors will remain at this rate. Yi Shiwen had come to know about this Sure Ji Ming character from the memories of the Fire Cloud disciples he had slaughtered earlier. As per the rules established by the Fire Cloud Cave, different elders were in charge of different areas. The elder of a particular area held the fate of everyone in that region. Every tribe in a region must obey the orders of their elder. No one could go against their elder. It was an exceptionally strict hierarchy and was dependent entirely on power for control and management. And that was why the backing strength of the elder of an area often came from the strongest tribe of that region. This area was controlled by the elder who belonged to the Sure tribe. And Sure Ji Ming was the son of Elder Sure. So, he often rode roughshod over people of this area, and nobody could stop him. Yeah, but we'll have to go anyway. Yang Hong heaved a sigh and muttered. Sure Ji Ming never summoned them to attack any tough, ominous beast, but to fight territorial battles with other tribes, or to compete for various treasures. Small tribes like theirs were often used as cannon fodder. However, they'd have to participate even if they knew the truth. The loss of lives would be inevitable if they were to answer the summonses. But they might get slaughtered by the Sure tribe if they were to turn these summonses down. This was a big problem. If Brother Yang doesn't mind, I'd also like to join you guys. Yi Shiwen offered with a laugh. The warriors of the Yang tribe looked at Yi Shiwen in astonishment. Most people would want to run and hide in the wake of such summons. They weren't foolish. They knew that they'd be used as cannon fodder. However, they'd have to serve these summonses for their tribe's safety. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't involved in this mess. It was unnecessary for him to go on this deadly mission. Sure, brother. Yang Hong patted Yi Ziwen's shoulder. He seemed somewhat excited. The barbarians were uncouthly people, but they were quite straightforward and frank in demeanor. Yi Shiwen would have been suspected for scheming something if he were to act like this in the southern region. However, this was southern wasteland. He was just another good and loyal fellow warrior in the eyes of these barbarians. Of course, no one would object if Yi Shiwen wanted to come along. They had witnessed Yi Ziwen's tyrannical strength. In fact, Yi Shiwen had single-handedly saved them when their entire team had been cornered by that bone beast. That bone beast hadn't stood a chance against Yi Shiwen and had been conveniently crushed to death. The level of Yi Ziwen's fire cloud's falling sky hand move had baffled them. His was a wide-range and profound attack. Their own attacks wouldn't come even close. It was a martial art technique that was easy to learn but hard to master. They could only use the fire cloud's falling sky hand move in coordination with other martial art techniques. However, the same technique had displayed incredible might when wielded by Yi Shiwen. In their opinion, Yi Shiwen was an expert from a big tribe. He had probably come out on a traveling adventure. They had noticed his style and conduct. They could tell that he didn't belong to a small tribe. The most important thing for an ordinary small tribe wasn't to expand or to dominate the world. Instead, it was to ensure their survival. Food was always a scarce resource, no matter what time of year it was. This bone beast could be considered as a very valuable source of food for any small tribe. However, Yi Shiwen had casually crushed it to bits without any hesitation. Moreover, this beast wasn't a stint. This showed that he must be from some big tribe where there was no scarcity of food. Everyone envied him in their heart, but they didn't say anything. Yi Shiwen didn't know that merely blowing off a bone beast would lead these people to assume so much about him. He merely wanted to go with them. He naturally had his own plans. Only Yang Hong and Yang Na responded to the summons from this team. The other warriors returned to the Yang tribe with their deceased comrades. Yang Hong and Yang Na were the most powerful warriors in their tribe. So, it was enough that they were going. They trod on the rainbow lights and arrived before the river Agate Mountain, as that barbarian messenger had told them. Yang Hong, Yang Na, what are you up to? Are you trying to disrespect young Master Shi? A snort sounded as soon as the three of them stepped down from the rainbow lights. To be continued. Chapter 382. Yang Hong, Yang Na, what are you up to? Are you trying to disrespect young Master Shi? A snort sounded as soon as the three of them stepped down from the rainbow lights. A tall figure appeared from afar. It was treading on the rainbow light. He had a robust physique and was 10 feet tall. His bronze-colored skin was faintly glowing, thanks to the real elemental energy flowing within. A trace of fluctuating world principle was also present on his body. He had reached the extremely profound level of Legendary's great complete realm. He was half a step away from entering the semi-sage realm. He was exceptionally powerful. He was even more powerful than Yang Hong and Yang Na. Humph! Lei Yang Yun, whether we've tried to disrespect young Master Shi, it's not something you can comment on. Yang Hong stepped forward and retorted with a sneer. Yang Hong's strength was inferior to this man, but he didn't seem afraid of him. Humph! You're talking big. You all would have been slaughtered if your Yang tribe wasn't a servant tribe. Lei Yang Yun smiled coldly and said. It was clear that he held a deep grudge against the Yang siblings. No wonder he had blatantly touched a sore spot. Why did you bring an outsider? This man isn't a warrior of your Yang tribe. Lei Yang Yun glanced coldly at Yi Shiwen and said, He's a big benefactor of my Yang tribe. He's also a disciple of the Fire Cloud Cave. So, why can't he participate in young Master Shi's summons? Yang Hong asked without showing any weakness or hesitation. What a timely coincidence to have found a disciple of the Fire Cloud Cave to help you. This time, young Master Shi has summoned the local tribes only, not the outsiders. Even if we do encounter any outsiders, we must hide this matter from them at all costs. But instead of hiding it from the outsiders, you've brought one. We haven't gathered here to celebrate or fornicate like bandits. This matter is of utmost importance. Lei Yongyun sneered and counterattacked with his words. Actually, it was rare to come across such a sharp-mouthed barbarian. Moreover, our young Master Shi is so strong that even seizing the burning sun and melting it is a small matter for him. Why should we take the help of an outsider? Do you think that we are incompetent? You. Yang Na's complexion turned red. Lei Yongyun was a rare barbarian who knew how to take advantage of his sharp tongue. He had left the Yang siblings speechless by using only a few words. Yang Na wanted to refute him. However, she didn't know where to begin from. What you're saying isn't right. Why I can't help? When you say that young Master Shi has ordered to conceal this matter from outsiders, do you mean that his summons don't enjoy the popular support of the people? Is that why he's being forced to do it in secret? What's he up to? At this time, Yi Shiwen finally spoke. Lei Yongyun was indeed a sharp-mouthed barbarian in comparison to others like Yang Hong and Yang Na. However, he was nothing in comparison to Yi Shiwen. It's always easy to tag somebody with unfair label. Anyone can do it. I didn't mean that. Lei Yongyun's face was flushed when he heard Yi Ziwen's argument. He looked fiercely at Yi Shiwen, wishing he could swallow Yi Shiwen whole. He considered himself the best when it came to using sharp-mouthed arguments to his advantage, at least among the barbarian people. So, he didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would say such harsh words in reply. He hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would find a loophole in his own argument and would use it against him to openly shame him. You get lost from here. Lei Yongyun's eyes emitted an ominous glint as he looked towards Yi Shiwen. He didn't say anything further once he fell in the disadvantageous position in this war of words. Instead, he switched back to displaying the barbaric trait of letting his fist do the talking. Outsiders are not allowed to stick their nose in this matter. I dare you. Say one more sentence and he'll kill you without amnesty. Now, get lost. Yang Hong had informed Yi Shiwen about several things recently. Initially, there was only a small friction between this Lei Yongyun and their Yang tribe. Generally, they were constantly involved in small skirmishes. However, they all had ended in the Yang tribe's defeat, more or less. That was because Lei Yongyu was much stronger than the siblings. Moreover, the most important thing was that he took advantage of Shi Jiming's favor to do whatever he wanted. This had also boosted his arrogance. He would look to cause trouble for Yang tribe wherever and whenever he could. So, this wasn't about his mistrust on an outsider like Yi Shiwen. Instead, he was deliberately looking for an opportunity to cause trouble for the Yang tribe. Yi Shiwen listened to Lei Yongyun's threat, but he wasn't afraid. He merely sneered twice and replied, "Who do you think you are? You dare to bark in front of me. I, Yi Murin, have walked for many years among these 100,000 great mountains. There isn't anyone who hasn't seen me. Today, in admiration of young Master Shi, I've especially arrived here to help. But a dog like you dares to humiliate me. If not for giving face to young Master Shi, I would have already slapped you to death." Many barbarian warriors of the local tribes were present in the surroundings. They secretly felt delighted when they heard Yi Ziwen's rebuke. This Lei Yongyun relied on Shi Jiming's support to act arrogantly with everyone. He looked down on everyone and bullied them. He used small and insignificant matters as a catalyst, and even went as far as issuing the order to extinguish an entire tribe if he felt like it. In everyone's opinion, this Lei Yongyun was a nasty villain who was drunk on power, someone who had let the success get to his head. They had always despised him, but they couldn't do anything because he had Shi Jiming's support. They couldn't afford to offend Shi Jiming. Consequently, they also couldn't offend him. However, someone had appeared who was giving Lei Yongyun a taste of his own medicine. So, they couldn't help but be secretly thrilled. "You're courting death. Suddenly, a fierce beam of light flashed inside Lei Yongyun's eyes. Nobody had ever dared to humiliate him like this. Even though everyone considered him as Shi Ming's lackey, no one had ever dared to speak those words of truth in front of him. He usually maintained a proud and complacent appearance. You probably don't know whose territory you're in. Today, I'll send you off to see the barbarian god. Lei Yongyun had pulled out his lance while in the middle of his speech. The lance in his hand emitted ice-cold black rays of light. He then pointed it towards Yi Shiwen, and a terrifying aura began to surge throughout his body. People regarded Lei Yongyun as a sharp-mouthed lackey of Shi Ming's, but he possessed intrepid strength. His body was faintly emitting the trace semi-sage level aura. This meant that he had entered halfway into the semi-sage realm. Yang siblings often suffered losses at the hands of Lei Yongyun. Shi Ming was one of the reasons for this. However, the most important reason was that Lei Yongyun's possessed tyrannical strength. An ordinary expert of Legendary's great complete realm was no match for him. Bang! The sharp lance caused the surrounding space to collapse as it wantonly advanced forward with barbaric power. It appeared just like a long dragon that had been urged by Lei Yongyu to go wild. As if adding the finishing touch, that dragon went completely berserk like a real dragon. That black lance appeared like a long black dragon that blotted out the sky and shrouded the earth as it swept towards Yi Shiwen. This lance was made of extremely high-quality material, and the inscriptions on its body contained traces of sage power. An ordinary expert of Legendary's great complete realm could only escape when faced with the semi-sage level power of this lance. But any attempts to resist would simply make them fall under through suppression of the lance's might. But, unfortunately, it had encountered a target like Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen shot his fire cloud's falling sky hand without any hesitation as he faced the approaching long black dragon. Yi Ziwen's attack was overbearing and contained tyrannical power. It began to burn down everything around it. It advanced towards that long black dragon to grab it. Bang! That huge fiery cloud and the black light collided ferociously. It seemed as if the world had lost its color, and everyone had entered a dreadful world of red and black. The red cloud and the black beam had collided violently. The horrifying power of unimaginable proportions wantonly spread out from the center of collision in all directions. This set off storm waves everywhere. The space couldn't bear such a horrifying power and collapsed in the wake of this energy storm. The space would then restore itself, but once again got shattered by the storm. This was a terrible scene, the process of continuous reconstruction and destruction of the space. Everyone was dumbstruck. They promptly retreated to avoid getting crushed by the devastating force of such terrifying power. Everyone looked at these two men with a look of amazement in their eyes. They had never thought that the clash between these two could be so terrifying. Lei Yongyun was annoying according to those barbarian warriors, but his strength was still tyrannical. In fact, he was probably the first person under the age of 50 who had managed to get close to semi-sage realm. This meant that he didn't have any rivals under the age of 50 in the region. They weren't sure about whether he had any opponent or not, but everyone accepted that he was extremely tyrannical. However, Yi Shiwen hadn't fallen into a disadvantageous position in this fight. Everyone was astonished. It seemed as if they were witnessing some inconceivable miracle. However, the Yang siblings weren't affected by the sight of this. Previously, they had seen how Yi Shiwen had effortlessly killed that bone beast that was about to enter the semi-sage realm. It has been slaughtered by Yi Shiwen in an instant. That was sufficient to judge Yi Ziwen's tyrannical strength. No, it wasn't so. Soon, everyone discovered something that sent chills down their spine. They noticed that Yi Shiwen hadn't fallen into the disadvantageous position. Instead, he had obtained an upper hand in the battle. His fire cloud's falling sky hand crushed the black layer of energy formed around the lance and exposed its real body. However, Yi Shiwen didn't hold back and guided his fire cloud's falling sky hand to further grasp the lance. The defensive layer surrounding the lance broke, and the black lance was seized by Yi Ziwen's flaming hand. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's fire clouds falling sky hand seemed like a heavenly hand that had descended to the mortal world to punish these barbarian people. The black lance was grabbed and broken into tiny fragments. Puff! Lei Yang Yun's entire body shivered, and he suddenly spouted a mouthful of blood. Yi Shiwen had grabbed and broken the fragment of his soul that was concealed inside the lance. He could no longer control the lance without the fragment of his soul. Anyways, the lance had already been pinched to bits by Yi Shiwen and had turned into elements of energy. Lei Yang Yun recalled how long he had had to beg his elders in order to obtain this divine weapon. He had finally requested a great master in the tribe to create one just for him. He had nearly spent his entire savings to gather the myriad of expensive materials that were required to forge it. However, Yi Shiwen had crushed it to bits. This was like having a knife inserted in one's chest, leaving the body to drip blood drop by drop. Puff! Lei Yang Yun's entire body shivered once again as he spouted more blood from his mouth. This had happened due to the physiological impact of this invaluable loss. To be continued. Chapter 383. Everyone was dumbstruck. Nobody had thought that Yi Shiwen would defeat Lei Yang Yun's offensive in just one move. Lei Yang Yun's attack was nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. He had crushed it as if it were a child's play for him. My brethren of Lei tribe, go ahead and kill him for me, Lei Yang Yun bellowed. More than a dozen individuals, each possessing tyrannical aura, appeared in the surroundings. Each of these individuals was at Legendary's great complete realm and possessed tyrannical strength. Their intrepid barbaric auras had spread across the vast sky. Each of these individuals was a rare expert. The experts of the Lei tribe were twice as powerful as the experts of the Yang tribe. However, none of these experts was at semi-sage realm. A semi-sage expert wasn't comparable to a sage expert. However, it could be said that a semi-sage expert touched upon the word sage and was inherently different from ordinary mortals. Presently, almost all semi-sage experts have been sent to the front line to fight in the war between 100 Barbarians Cave and Fire Cloud Cave. But one could tell that the Fire Cloud Cave had an exceptionally deep background by merely looking at these profound experts of Legendary's great complete realm. Each of these individuals was capable enough of running rampant in a small area. Presently, all these experts were gathered here. It was clear that the Lei tribe was one of the biggest tribes in this area and had extremely tyrannical strength. It was certainly more powerful than the Yang tribe. However, Lei tribe was merely a subordinate force of the Fire Cloud Cave. Nothing more. These so-called major forces were visibly incredible. The Yuan school was nothing in front of these forces. Yi Shiwen felt very glad that he had left the Yuan school. Otherwise, he would have never gotten this exposure and would have remained a small bird in the nest called Yuan school. The experts roared in unison after they heard Lei Yang Yun's bellow. Their secret arts were unleashed in a flash. Endless divine beams illuminated half of the sky momentarily. These were the secret arts of the Lei tribe, as well as the Fire Cloud Cave. Many different kinds of secret arts were unleashed by them at once, but they didn't look messy or unorganized. These experts had honed their secret arts, thanks to their rich hunting experience. They knew the importance of teamwork during a hunt. They formed a massive and terrifying attack formation and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The endless barrage of offensives formed a wild diagram in the sky as their desolate aura swept out in the surroundings. This joint attack was enough to explode an expert of Legendary's great complete realm. Even an expert of semi-sage realm would hesitate to face this kind of a joint attack head-on. These barbarian people were different from the experts of the southern region. The experts of the southern region were often divided into units on the basis of their country. However, the barbarian people were divided into the units depending on their tribes. These units were often small, but the members often shared an unusual bond and sense of unity. Their tribe was the entire world for them. This was an extremely terrifying attack. It was aimed at entrapping and killing Yi Shiwen, without giving him a way out. Humph! Yi Shiwen sneered. He began to operate great desolate fire cloud power technique with all his strength. His body ejected fire-colored clouds that began to boil. A massive amount of majestic aura spread across the sky and condensed into a huge figure behind him. This figure was quite fuzzy, but a lot of people could recognize it. They were left shocked since this figure turned out to be the barbarian god. Many weaker warriors in the surroundings instinctively felt like kneeling down. That was because no matter which tribal group or force they belonged to, they were all descendants of the barbarian god. They had emerged out of the barbarian god Heavenly Temple. Once upon a time, the barbarian god Heavenly Temple was a colossus force. It would often clash with the true martial university in its prosperous times. However, the true martial university declined with the passage of time, and the barbarian god Heavenly Temple split into parts which were now known as Fire Cloud Cave and the Hundred Barbarians Cave. Every barbarian believed in the barbarian god and had given them various kinds of martial arts techniques. The barbarians of the southern wasteland shared same beliefs and practiced same martial arts since they had originated from the same barbarian god Heavenly Temple. However, the same wasn't true for the 5 regions of the continent. The origins of all the martial arts commonly found in the southern wasteland could be traced back to barbarian god, who was said to have taught the martial arts. Therefore, one could condense the phantom of the barbarian god if these techniques were practiced to the deeper level. In fact, one could even condense the real body of the barbarian god. However, it was necessary to comprehend the power technique to the extremely profound level to accomplish that. It had nothing to do with one's strength. It was mainly dependent on the extent to which the power law had been comprehended. Yi Shiwen hadn't condensed the real body of the barbarian god. However, he had condensed the phantom of the barbarian god, as mentioned in the legends. Therefore, everyone's eyes popped out, and they looked at Yi Shiwen in disbelief. It was difficult for them to believe that he had actually condensed the phantom of the barbarian god. To be able to achieve such a feat at his age, it could be said that he was a top genius. The barbarian god roared loudly behind Yi Shiwen's body. Countless fire clouds condensed together to form a red-colored blazing lance in its hand. It was burning in the sky. A terrifying power was surging and boiling throughout its body. Whoosh! The phantom of the barbarian god fiercely shot the blazing lance. It went blazing out. Bang! The blazing lance pierced its way forward across the sky. It seemed as it would destroy the world as it crossed the expansive sky and collided with that wild diagram. Rumble! That blazing lance unleashed a terrifying rainbow light which effortlessly pierced through that wild diagram and destroyed it in an instant. Those dozen or more barbarian experts were violently shaken by the enormous shockwave. They spouted blood from their mouths, and their huge bodies were sent flying upside down. Their robust bodies had been nearly torn apart by the horrifying pressure of Yi Shiwen's attack. Lei Yongyun was watching the scene. The experts of his own tribe were nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. They couldn't even resist a single move of his. It was simply unbelievable. How can this be? How is this possible? When my Lei tribe's experts of Legendary's great complete realm attack together, even an ominous beast of semi-sage realm will have to run for shelter. It won't dare to fight when faced with this kind of an attack. Otherwise, its entire body will be torn apart by this terrifying force. Lei Yongyun couldn't believe this. An extremely frightened look appeared on his face. There wasn't just a look of disbelief in his eyes as he looked towards Yi Shiwen, but also bitterness and incomparable hatred. Yi Shiwen sneered. Perhaps an ordinary expert of semi-sage realm wouldn't be able to face such a joint attack and might sustain injuries. However, it was nothing for Yi Shiwen's gilded tyrant form. Even if the opposite party had used a divine tool and bombarded it on Yi Shiwen's body, it still wouldn't have caused any harm to him. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's figure tore its way through the vast sky. Suddenly, he appeared in front of Lei Yongyun and grabbed his neck. Bang! Lei Yongyun was thrust into a mountain peak by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen looked at him coldly and said, "I had told you, don't be pretentious in front of me. I can effortlessly kill you if I want to." Yi Shiwen spoke very casually. This Lei Yongyun was nothing in his opinion. He might have extremely profound martial power, but it wasn't enough in comparison to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen possessed unimaginable strength. Lei Yongyun noticed that his entire body had been embedded into the mountain peak. It was becoming difficult for him to breathe. The oxygen was getting less and less, and he had already begun to lose consciousness. The lack of oxygen was making him crazy. The barbarians present in the surroundings looked at Lei Yongyun in disbelief. Yi Shiwen had nearly killed him. They couldn't believe their eyes. This Lei Yongyun had consistently carried the image of a self-proclaimed tyrant for so many years. However, he had been so easily defeated by Yi Shiwen. It was evident that he wasn't Yi Ziwen's opponent. Yi Ziwen's approach had been the same as that of other barbarians: brutal, crude, and straightforward. The experts of the Lei tribe who hadn't yet fainted managed to catch a glimpse as Lei Yongyun was shoved into the mountain peak. They sighed with sorrow since they secretly felt that they had ended up offending a big shot. They felt as if they had kicked an iron wall. Yang Hong and Yang Na were in extreme shock. They knew that Yi Shiwen was very intrepid, and an average expert was no match for him. However, they were deeply shocked after watching Yi Shiwen in combat, and how he had effortlessly defeated so many experts of the Lei tribe. Yi Shiwen was more powerful than they had imagined. In fact, it could be said that he was countless times more powerful than what they had expected. Well, I didn't know that there was such an outstanding genius in the younger generation. A burst of an applauding sound came from afar and permeated throughout the world. Yi Shiwen saw a figure approaching in the sky. It was a young man, approximately 20 years old. He had rough facial features. He was tall and sturdy. An intrepid aura was surging upon his body. Young Master Shi. The barbarians saluted in unison as they saw him approach. This youth was the young Master Shi Jiming. He was being followed by dozens of terrifying experts of the legendary realm. Those experts were at Legendary's great complete realm. Their imposing aura was spreading out, little by little. Suddenly, a trace of surprise appeared in Yi Ziwen's eyes as he saw that youth. That youth was at Semi-Sage realm. He was merely at the initial stage of Semi-Sage realm, but his aura had suppressed everyone on the scene. Others simply couldn't look into his eyes under the suppression effect of his imposing aura. Yi Shiwen was the only exception. His divinities could automatically eliminate this kind of suppression. After all, divinity was the power of the gods. They couldn't possibly allow an ordinary mortal to humiliate them. Shi Jiming had turned out to be more powerful than Yi Shiwen had imagined. He was unexpectedly an expert of Semi-Sage realm. Good, you're pretty good. Shi Jiming suddenly laughed and said when he saw that Yi Shiwen stood unaffected under his suppression. Suddenly, Shi Jiming looked towards Lei Yongyun, who had been thrust inside the mountain peak by Yi Shiwen, and spoke, "You're useless. You made me lose face." Lei Yongyun felt extremely humiliated when he heard Shi Jiming's words. He got angry, but couldn't dare to make Shi Jiming more furious. So, he could only get angry secretly inside. He was stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen, as if he'd kill Yi Shiwen with his glare. Yi Shiwen naturally understood that he must stop since Shi Jiming, a semi-sage expert, had arrived. To be continued. Chapter 384. Shi Jiming hadn't inflicted a small suppression on Yi Shiwen. Presently, Yi Shiwen wasn't capable of dealing with this semi-sage expert, and he certainly couldn't bring out his blood slave under these circumstances. So, Yi Shiwen was wary of Shi Jiming, but he wasn't afraid of him. Shi Jiming had abandoned Lei Yongyun as if he were a worn-out shoe. Yi Shiwen secretly felt that Shi Jiming was indeed a vicious and merciless man when he saw this. Yi Shiwen wouldn't have acted like this if he were in Shi Jiming's place. On the contrary, if the people of Yi Ziwen's Qianyu faction were being bullied like this, he would have surely come to their rescue. However, it could be said that Shi Jiming was an exception by the blunt and straightforward standards of the barbarians. Lei Yongyun had been beaten up quite miserably in front of his eyes, but Shi Jiming had surprisingly showed a pleasant countenance towards Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen wasn't moved by this unexpected turn of events. On the contrary, he had come to hold a negative conjecture about Shi Jiming. How could Yi Shiwen not have understood Shi Jiming's motive? It was obvious that Shi Jiming wanted to win over Yi Shiwen, a barbarian expert who had a bright future ahead of him. Yi Shiwen had condensed the phantom of the barbarian god, so he had definitely proven himself as an outstanding talent. Everyone also knew that Shi Jiming had the ambitions to compete for the position of this region's elder in the future. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't interested since he had his own ulterior motives for arriving here. But he wouldn't have been moved by Shi Jiming even if he were a real barbarian. Yi Shiwen was secretly wary of him. Shi Jiming had abandoned his subordinate in order to rope in a stranger. Some people might think that he was being courteous, but it also showed how unkind and cruel he inherently was. Yi Shiwen sighed with emotion. Once stained with power and authority, even an ordinary barbarian could turn evil. We just obtained the news that sunflower water essence has been found inside the 10,000-year-old cold pond in the Iron Pond Mountain. We'll go to find that sunflower water essence. Everyone shall be rewarded once I get my hands on it. Shi Jiming glanced at everyone and spoke. However, don't blame me for being impolite if you aren't able to find it for me. His fake polite behavior vanished as he said this, and his true color surfaced. An envious look flashed in everyone's eyes. Sunflower water essence was a superb item. It was quite difficult for such a wonderful item to appear even in 10,000 years. If these experts of Legendary's complete realm could swallow even one, then it could initiate a complete qualitative change within them that would help them in stepping into the semi-sage realm. The biggest problem in stepping into the semi-sage realm was sensing the world principles, grabbing them, and then condensing them into Tao principles within one's body. Several experts had accumulated enough energy over the course of time. Some had even accumulated it to an unimaginable degree. The continual accumulation of energy for hundreds of years would bloat the accumulated energy to a terrifying extent. However, this was useless since the accumulation of energy wasn't enough to have a breakthrough. They could only perceive the existence of world principles to a preliminary stage. In their eyes, these principles looked messy, like a pile of multicolored wool tangled together. They were colorblind and couldn't differentiate between principles. More talented people could see it more clearly. However, no one could see them as clearly as Yi Shiwen. Each and every principle was indistinctly visible to him. In fact, he had already comprehended several of these principles to an enormous extent. Visualizing the real world and the world with the principles was as easy as opening and closing one's eyes in Yi Zaiwen's perspective. However, other people didn't have such luck. They must blindly explore the dark in the hope to find and perceive a principle. But it was very difficult to find. However, a 10,000-year-old sunflower water essence was the combination of several principles. It could help them in moving a step forward towards comprehending the world principles by guiding them in the right direction. Perhaps they would step into the semi-sage realm in less than 2 years if they could obtain the sunflower water essence. The sunflower water essence was extremely precious. It could also be used to increase the number of principles within one's body, apart from helping one in comprehending profound principles. It could increase the number of principles within one's body by 100. And this was a big opportunity to find a sunflower water essence. No wonder why Shi Jiming had summoned them to go together in search of the sunflower water essence. It made sense. Yi Shiwen speculated secretly. Who wouldn't like to have a sunflower water essence? He must look for an opportunity to seize it. He would gain a big advantage with its help when he'd condense principles in the future. But he'd need to get his hands on it first. Yes, everyone replied in unison. Shi Jiming was walking in the forefront, while Yi Shiwen was right behind him. The barbarian people didn't dare to interrupt Yi Shiwen. They had seen his strength just a moment ago. He was weaker than Shi Jiming, but he was undoubtedly more powerful than any of them. It was impossible for them to defeat Shi Jiming even if they joined forces. and it was similarly impossible for them to defeat Yi Shiwen. Shi Jiming and Yi Shiwen were similar in this regard, at least in their eyes. There was practically no difference. On the way, Shi Jiming thought of every possible method to win over Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen also didn't wish to have a fallout with him at this point, so he feigned politeness as well. They trod on the rainbow light and arrived at the Iron Pond Mountain. Yi Shiwen listened to the comments of these barbarian people during the journey and discovered how Iron Pond Mountain got its name. This mountain was home to a 10,000-year-old cold pond. Water inside this pond was cold and heavy beyond description. Even a drop weighed several kilograms, just like molten iron. Since then, the pond had been called as Molten Iron Pond. Then, people started to call this mountain Iron Pond Mountain as time passed. Everyone entered the Iron Pond Mountain atop their rainbow lights. That 10,000-year-old cold pond was as cold as ice. People could feel the chill in the air, even from a distance. However, strangely, the trees on the mountain didn't seem affected. The cold pond was surrounded by a dense forest, but the trees were as hard as gold and iron. Soon, everyone arrived at the shore of the cold pond. They began to wait quietly. The sunflower water essence was a 10,000 years old item formed by the integration of water essence with the world principles. It could even be said to be a natural spirit, as it had a certain amount of spiritual wisdom too. Therefore, they must wait patiently. Nobody dared to step into the cold pond. The reason was quite simple. The cold pond could freeze them to death. Even these experts of Legendary's great complete realm would be directly frozen to death. A semi-sage expert could probably resist the cold inside the pond with the help of the principles within his body, but at the cost of having their strength reduced greatly. Soon, Shi Jiming's complexion turned ugly. That was because another team of experts had arrived after them. This team was headed by a woman. She was approximately 20 years old and had a somewhat oval and chubby face. She had a divine look in her big round eyes and was somewhat dark in complexion. A valiant aura was overflowing from her body. She was surprisingly an expert of semi-sage realm. The experts of the Fire Cloud Cave were suddenly in a state of tumult as they watched these people arrive. Yi Shiwen also recognized her from the memories of the disciples he had killed. She was an expert of the Fire Cloud Cave's arch-rival, 100 Barbarians Cave. However, he didn't specifically know much about her. Who is she? Why is everyone so perturbed to see her? Yi Shiwen asked Yang Hong, who stood beside him. She is the daughter of an elder of 100 Barbarians Cave. Her name is Pan Shui Rong. She enjoys good fame in the younger generation of 100 Barbarians Cave. Yang Hong lowered his voice and said, "This Pan Shui Rong and our young Master Shi have harbored deep enmity from the beginning, apart from the rivalry between the 100 Barbarians Cave and our Fire Cloud Cave. It seems like we may have to fight with them." Shi Jiming's complexion had turned exceptionally unsightly. The arrival of the 100 Barbarians Cave's experts was proof that this matter had been leaked out. Moreover, it was such a big leak that it had attracted his arch-rival Pan Shui Rong. He had thought that he'd suppress her after he had obtained the sunflower water essence. However, he didn't expect that she'd receive the news as well. "Ha ha!" Shi Jiming let out a hollow laughter. Then he looked at Pan Shui Rong and said, "You've sniffed the news quite quickly. It's like you have the sharp nose of a dog, and a very sensitive one at that." The barbarian expert standing behind Pan Shui Rong became furious at this. Did Shi Jiming just call them dogs? This was a serious insult. Pan Shui Rong's face also revealed a trace of anger as she spoke back. "Do you think that only you're allowed to have such fortuitous encounters? We're determined to obtain this sunflower water essence. It will be a waste if it lands in the hands of a useless person like you." Shi Jiming's face turned ashen. He didn't have a big heart, unlike he had always pretended to. Not to mention that the opponent was an old rival. Well, come to know who the useless person is at the end of the fight. Shi Jiming revealed his true colors. He was determined to win sunflower water essence at any cost. However, the opposite party was unlikely to give up either. Talking wasn't the best option here. There was only one way, and that was to let the fist do the talking. This was the most common method used by barbarian people to settle any dispute. The one with the heavier fist would get to have their say. Quite simple, but it was also very effective. "Begin!" Shi Ming shouted loudly. The disciples of Fire Cloud Cave shot a variety of martial arts towards the experts of 100 Barbarians Cave. The experts of 100 Barbarians Cave weren't resigned to be outdone either. They launched their counterattacks without any delay. They had been on alert all along, just like the experts of the Fire Cloud Cave. So, they were able to react in time, even though the fight had erupted all of a sudden. Bang! 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 The fight between hundreds of experts shook the entire Iron Pond Mountain, especially because they were all experts of Legendary's great complete realm. On the other hand, Shi Ming and Pan Shui Rong rose high up into the sky to fight. They weren't suited to fight on the mountain, since it would collapse. Pucci, a sharp blade cut across the vast sky with a flash of black light. It then arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. It was aimed straight at him, and was clearly thrown with the intention to kill him. How could Yi Shiwen fall for this sneak attack? He let out a cold shout, and terrifying sound waves scattered in all directions. That black light was dispersed, and an iron dart was revealed. Yi Shiwen stretched out his fingers and grabbed it. Bang! The iron dart was broken into small pieces, inch by inch. To be continued. Chapter 385. Puff! That expert of 100 Barbarians Cave spouted blood from his mouth. The fragment of his soul inside the iron dart had been crushed by Yi Shiwen. Then a golden ray of light arrived in front of his face. He couldn't do anything but watch its approach. He didn't have strength equal to that of Yi Shiwen. In the end, his head exploded with a bang. This was a terrifying melee warfare. The 100 Barbarians Cave and Fire Cloud Cave had countless years-old enmity. Both the sides were resorting to the used deadly means. Even their leaders weren't holding back. The two of them clamored as they rushed up into the sky and began to fight. Yang Hong and Yang Na were in a similar state. The hatred had taken deep root inside them as well. Bang! 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 Yi Shiwen was shuttling back and forth while everyone was indulged in battle, just like a golden flash. These people were certainly the experts of Legendary's great complete realm, but they weren't his match. Yi Shiwen had deliberately restrained his own strength since he didn't possess any hatred or enmity towards the hidden Barbarians Cave. Anyway, he didn't desire to work himself to death for the Fire Cloud Cave. Haha, I didn't expect this place to be so lively. A wild laughter sounded from a distant place in the middle of this battle of life or death. A group of people could be seen approaching them from afar. They trod on rainbow lights. This was another team of barbarian people. The experts of the Fire Cloud Cave and the 100 Barbarians Cave stopped fighting as they watched these new people approach. It was as if they had a prior tacit understanding or something. They didn't want the third party to benefit from their fight. These newcomers weren't inferior to the experts of the Fire Cloud Cave and the 100 Barbarian Cave. All of them were experts of Legendary's great complete realm. They were headed by a man who was approximately 30 years old. He was tall and had rough facial features. His nose was crooked by like an eagle's beak. This gave his face a sinister look. A giant black divine eagle had spread out its wings. It was more than 10 meters tall and was circling around him. A trace of sage-level power was overflowing from his body. It was obvious that he was an expert of semi-sage realm. The warriors of the Eagle Cave? How the hell did they arrive here? Yang Hong cursed. Yi Shiwen recalled about the Eagle Cave from the memories of their disciples he had earlier killed. The Eagle Cave was also a major force of the Southern Wasteland. Strength-wise, it was no less than any of the other two caves. But the most troublesome thing about them was that each disciple of the Eagle Cave used an ominous eagle beast as their mount. In fact, they grew up with their eagle beast. These Eagle Cave disciples were considered as formidable enemies because of the powerful tag team they formed with their pet eagles. These eagles were often very powerful as well. Shi Ming's complexion turned ugly as he flew down from the sky. Clearly, the battle between Pan Shui Rong in him couldn't reach a conclusion. He was very confident that his cultivation would increase dramatically once he had obtained the sunflower water essence. Then, he'd be able to suppress his arch-rival Pan Shui Rong. However, the new leak hadn't only attracted Pan Shui Rong, but also a senior semi-sage expert of Eagle Cave, named doing Das cultivation was nearly equal to that of the other two. However, he possessed about 200 principles within his body. He was very difficult to deal with. Moreover, his mount, that black divine eagle, was also its semi-sage realm. The molten iron pond started to seem very small as the three giant forces gathered around it. The place seemed packed. However, no one among the three parties took the initiative to begin. Everyone was afraid that the last standing party would benefit from the conflict between the first two. Moreover, the sunflower water essence hadn't appeared yet. Therefore, the three forces were waiting with patience. The surface of the pond was tranquil. Slowly, the curtain of night descended. The sunlight was replaced by the moonlight. The moonlight seemed to be gently caressing the earth. The sound of an internal turbulence started to reverberate from the pond. Everyone knew that the sunflower water essence was about to appear. They knew that it was going to take birth with some spiritual wisdom. That sunflower water essence could become a terrifying force in the future if it could have a chance to absorb the essence of the sun and the moon for thousands of years. However, these experts wouldn't let it. Ripples appeared on the water surface. Everyone held their breath. They didn't dare to make any noise since they didn't wish to scare away the sunflower water essence. Soon, a group of azure-colored water bubbles emerged from the cold pond and took a human form before everyone's eyes. Everyone was spellbound by the peculiar azure color of its body. It was exuding an incredibly beautiful radiance. Begin! It was hard to tell who shouted from the crowd, but several hundred experts immediately rushed forward to grab the sunflower water essence. Everyone wanted to capture the sunflower water essence. They couldn't think of anything else in this moment. Greed had prevailed over everyone. Yishuan didn't move. He quietly changed his stature once again. His height had increased significantly. His facial features had turned even rougher. He quietly circled behind everyone. So many people were competing for that sunflower water essence. Moreover, there were 4 experts of semi-sage realm on the scene, including Ingda and his eagle. How could he get the opportunity to grab that sunflower water essence before everyone? Bang! A shocking water column emerged from the tranquil pond. It went straight up into the sky like a massive spear. The bulky column of water blotted out the sky and fell towards the experts who were still in midair. Puff! 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 Several experts didn't get enough time to dodge, and the water column crashed into them. The terrifying force crushed them into fragments. Sad and shrill cries echoed throughout the entire Iron Pond Mountain in the peaceful night. Blood splashed everywhere in the air. In fact, it seemed like blood had rained from the sky. Who was it? Shi Jiming shouted as he unleashed the fire cloud's falling sky hand. His attack pressed down like a huge fire cloud. Bang! The entire water surface of the pond began to boil up. A seemingly endless amount of water vaporized in an instant. At this time, a huge shadow appeared from the middle of the pond. Meanwhile, the sunflower water essence was scared away by the battling experts and submerged deep into the pond. Roar! Suddenly, that black shadowy figure let out a loud roar. It sounded similar to the roar of a dragon. Everyone's gazes finally pierced through dark curtain of night, and they saw who it really was. It was a wicked flood dragon of semi-sage realm. These so-called heavenly treasures were often guarded by all sorts of beasts. This sunflower water essence was being guarded by this flood dragon. The flood dragon must be waiting for this sunflower water essence to mature. It probably wanted to consume it for enhancing its cultivation further. The black scales of the flood dragon appeared ominous under the moonlight. They had frightened everyone. Its ice-cold eyes were like a pair of red lanterns and were glaring at everyone. Yi Shiwen felt an abnormal and dangerous aura arising from the body of that flood dragon. This feeling was more intimidating compared to what he had felt when he had first seen Shi Jiming and other semi-sage experts. This inborn strange beast was undoubtedly catastrophic. It was very strong. In fact, it could be said that it was hard to find a match for this flood dragon. Its dragon power was overflowing everywhere. It was applying suppression force on everyone in the vicinity. Humans, get lost! The flood dragon revealed its mouthful of steel-like teeth and bellowed. A foul and fishy smell spread in the surroundings and assaulted everyone's nostrils. It also unleashed its demonic energy in the surroundings. Dragons were supposed to be auspicious creatures according to the hearsay. However, there were evil dragons in this world as well, and flood dragons were widely known for their brutal and ferocious nature. I am guarding this sunflower water essence for 500 years now, so you better get lost. Otherwise, it'll kill you all. The flood dragon roared as its huge body suddenly slammed against the pond's surface and splashed countless water droplets in the air. The water droplets then fell down from the sky like raindrops. These water droplets were very heavy and weighed up to several kilograms. The weight of falling water reached a horrifying extent when gathered together. Several weak warriors had their bodies smashed by the falling water and sustained severe injuries. Everybody, it doesn't matter how we compete amongst ourselves, but we mustn't lose to this beast. It will be best if we join hands to first kill this beast. Pan Shui Rong stepped forward and suggested. Everyone knew that this flood dragon was very powerful. They couldn't dare to fight head-on with it. It was clear that this flood dragon was also afraid of them teaming up against it. Otherwise, this fierce beast would have attacked and slaughtered them by now. All right, let's join hands and kill this beast first. Ingda replied in agreement. Now, everyone's gazes turned toward Shi Ming since they didn't know what he'd choose. Shi Ming struggled a bit, but finally made his decision. He nodded and agreed with the idea of forming a team to kill this flood dragon first. Attack, he shouted, and the fire cloud's falling sky hand swept out from his body. It rushed out and pressed down upon that flood dragon. Pan Shui Rong and Ingda also shot various martial attacks towards the flood dragon. The flood dragon suddenly got furious. It had already taken into account that it wouldn't be able to contend against the combined force of these semi-sage experts. It knew that it wouldn't be able to slaughter them very easily if they joined hands. But it hadn't expected that they'd collaborate to take it down. The flood dragon roared. It opened its big mouth and spat an extremely cold breath. This breath froze everything in the surroundings, including the space. Then, the frozen space started to shatter, inch by inch. Bang! This cold breath attack and the attacks of other experts collided severely. The terrifying energy waves swept out in the surroundings. Yishuan no longer hesitated and restrained his breath. He stealthily retreated from that chaotic scene. Nobody spotted him doing so. Yishuan carefully walked far away. Now everyone looked like tiny dots from that distance. Then he dived into the pond. He was suddenly struck by the piercing chill and was left shiver uncontrollably. His entire body froze stiff and sank down. Yishuan secretly thought that this wasn't a good idea. It was much colder inside the pond than outside. He might get frozen to death if he stayed longer in the pond. Luckily, he had activated the resistance. Yishuan had begun to operate his real elemental energy frantically at maximum output. Its output speed was getting faster and faster. Thanks to that, his complexion was gradually restored. His breathing went back to normal. The temperature in the pond was seriously terrible, and the temperature fell by several degrees with every meter that he sank into the depths of the pond. Moreover, it was hard to determine how deep this pond was in reality. Yi Shiwen could faintly hear the fluctuations coming from the surface. These fluctuations had been caused by the battle that was taking place on the surface. However, that couldn't affect the state of water in the pond. Yi Shiwen realized that those fluctuations couldn't penetrate deeper into the pond, probably because of the heavy weight of water. He released his divine sense to look for the whereabouts of that sunflower water essence, which had taken advantage of the sudden appearance of the flood dragon to escape deeper into the pond. It was very difficult for an average person to use their divine sense to search in this kind of an environment. However, It was a piece of cake for Yi Shiwen since he had wrapped his divine sense in divinities. Therefore, his divine sense could spread anywhere with an irresistible force. Eventually, Yi Zaiwen's divine sense pinpointed the location of the sunflower water essence. A smile appeared on his face. He stretched out his big golden hand and grabbed the sunflower water essence. To be continued. Chapter 386. The sunflower water essence, 1, was constantly struggling in Yi Zaiwen's hands. But it could never break from Yi Zaiwen's grasp. Yi Shiwen had control over it since he held it firmly. Yi Shiwen felt a trace of foreign soul inside that sunflower water essence. It probably belonged to that flood dragon. It must put a fraction of its soul inside the sunflower water essence to locate it at any time. Yi Shiwen swallowed the sunflower water essence without any hesitation. He could feel the sunflower water essence dissolve within his body. The high-quality water essence gradually spread throughout his body and repaired a few of his subtle internal injuries. The sunflower water essence itself possessed many principles. Its best function was that it could increase the number of principles inside one's body. The flood dragon was still outside the pond, but he became aware of this matter the moment it took place. It roared again and said, "Bastards! You tricked me by dragging me away from the sunflower water essence. You snatched it away in my absence." The flood dragon released a terrifying dragon breath to force open its way through the crowd of experts. Then, its huge body dived into the cold pond, paying no regards to the encirclement of those three forces. The flood dragon was extremely fierce. However, it wasn't a match for this joint force. The opposite party had 4 semi-sage realm experts. The wishes of these 4 semi-sage experts weren't aligned, but they could still inflict enormous pressure on the flood dragon since they were working together. In fact, they could even slay this flood dragon if they could manage to work together as a proper team. The soul of this flood dragon that was present inside the sunflower water essence had been crushed. This meant that it had fallen into someone's hands. The flood dragon had protected it for hundreds of years. How would he not act anxiously to get it back? The flood dragon set off endless water splashes as it dived into the pond. Everyone looked at each other. The flood dragon didn't seem to be acting or faking to them. Did something really happen? However, it didn't matter whether something had happened or not. It was vital to pursue the flood dragon one way or the other. "Pursue it!" Ingda roared. His divine eagle dived into the pond after him. Pan Shui Rong and Shi Ming also dived into the pond. As far as others were concerned, they could only look at each other. They didn't dare to pursue that flood dragon into the pond. They would be frozen to death in the pond since they didn't have the support of the semi-sage principles. Even Yi Shiwen could survive in the pond because of his powerful gilded tyrant form only. The golden divinities had wrapped around him to protect him from the intense chill in the depths of the pond. Yi Shiwen felt that something was swimming down the pond. He guessed that it could be the flood dragon since its soul had been crushed by him. However, Yi Shiwen had already anticipated that. If its soul hadn't been crushed, the flood dragon would have come down by tracing its soul. So, Yi Shiwen had made the decision to crush the wisp of its soul, once and for all. Yi Shiwen digested the sunflower water essence and felt that it had moistened his whole body. The biggest advantage of this was his physical quality and aptitude would enhance significantly in the future. It was a rare treasure. Such treasures didn't grow often, even in 10,000 years. Yi Shiwen clenched his teeth and proceeded to face the heavenly tribulation. He had enough strength now. He had planned that He'd look for a place to undergo closed-door training after he had killed Zhu Tianzong. Then, He'd be able to have a breakthrough into half-step legendary 9th stage. His fighting strength would reach semi-sage level in one fell swoop if that were to happen. 2. He was confident that he could condense the principles of semi-sage level, especially after forming his own blood slave. However, he presently wasn't in a position to condense the semi-sage principles. So, he had begun to have a breakthrough on the spot. Damn it! You lay your hands on the sunflower water essence by taking the advantage of my absence. The flood dragon roared loudly as it rushed down. There was no living creature inside the entire pond apart from Yishuan. So, he was clearly visible to the flood dragon's eyes, just like a source of bright light in dark night. Puff! The flood dragon roared and spat its terrifying dragon breath. The exceptionally cold water posed no resistance to the dragon breath as it rushed forward. It froze the surrounding water in its path and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen like a long spear with incomparable and frightening might. Kaboom! The ice-cold dragon breath didn't crash into Yi Zaiwen's body as the flood dragon had expected. Instead, it was blocked by a blood-red figure that had suddenly appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. It was the blood slave that Yi Shiwen had previously condensed. The red blood exploded beneath the blood slave's feet and propelled its body forward through the cold, heavy water like a red arrow. The blood slave arrived beside that flood dragon and launched an attack. The blood slave's fire cloud sky falling hand pressed down upon the flood dragon. Yi Shiwen had condensed this blood slave, and its soul was linked with Yi Shiwen. That's why it could do anything that Yi Shiwen could. Yi Shiwen had comprehended the fire cloud sky falling hand to a very high degree, and the blood slave's attack wasn't one bit inferior to Yi Zaiwen's. And the tyranny of this attack had increased countless times since the tyrannical power of Semi-Sage Realm had been added to it. In fact, the blood slave's attack was several times more powerful than Yi Zaiwen's own. The fire cloud sky falling hand rumbled on the forehead of that flood dragon. It caused sparks, and a terrifying power began to boil on the flood dragon's body. Bang! The flood dragon's scales were blasted and peeled off by the blood slave's attack. Its scales fell off, and its blood started to gush out. Roar! The flood dragon had been wounded by a single palm attack by the blood slave. It began to scream in pain. Ingda, Pan Shui Rong, and Shiji Ming had also managed to dive to the pond's depth by now. They saw the flood dragon confronting the blood slave. They began to believe that the flood dragon had been right. Someone had secretly snatched away the sunflower water essence by taking the advantage of their fight outside the pond. The three of them immediately became angry. Ingda cursed out loud in anger. Damn it. I was engaged in a life or death fight above, and you sneaked down here to steal the sunflower water essence. You bastard. Unfortunately, the blood slave couldn't speak or think. It just coldly looked at everyone with a murderous look in its eyes. Bang! The fire cloud sky falling hand appeared again. It overwhelmingly spread out and went towards those three experts to grab them. Fire cloud sky falling hand. The three experts immediately recognized the fire cloud sky falling hand. After all, it was the signature martial art move of the fire cloud cave. They couldn't possibly mistake it for something else. Shiji Ming was even more familiar with it than the others. Who are you? How do you know the martial art of our fire cloud cave? Shiji Ming became very depressed since the others had started to eye him in suspicion. He wouldn't have been this troubled if he had ordered one of his own to pull this off. But he hadn't. Yet, there was no way to prove it otherwise since the martial arts of Fire Cloud Cave was too recognizable. Damn it! Shiji Ming shouted loudly, and shot the same fire cloud sky falling hand in reply. The two terrifying attacks ferociously collided. It appeared as if two gigantic fire clouds had clashed. Dreadful energy waves swept out in the surroundings and displaced several gallons of heavy water in a flash. You two also attack. Don't just stand stunned like that. This bastard isn't one of my men. Shiji Ming retreated several steps before he finally came to a halt. His huge body had been pushed back. He had fallen into a disadvantageous position when faced with the frightening force contained in his opponent's attack. The blood slave wasn't being cautious, since it was condensed from a wisp of a star colossus soul. So, its body was bound to be extremely formidable and dreadful. Ingda and Pan Shui Rong eventually came back to their senses after hearing Shiji Ming shout. They realized that this person might not be one of Shiji Ming's men in reality. They didn't hesitate any further and rushed towards the blood slave. Meanwhile, The flood dragon rushed towards Yi Shiwen since it had failed to deal with the blood slave. It could still feel the sunflower water essence's aura, and it was coming from Yi Xiwen's body. "Damn you, human! I will kill you! How dare you to steal my treasure?" The flood dragon spoke out of anger as it saw Yi Shiwen sitting cross-legged. It had waited for 100 years for this sunflower water essence to mature, and Yi Shiwen had stolen it. The flood dragon roared loudly. The black scales throughout its body, some covered in blood, ejaculated an incredible divine beam. It appeared as if the flood dragon was treading on the waves it dashed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. Bang! The blood slave suddenly attacked from a distance, even though he had been besieged by 3 attackers of his own. A long dragon went flying towards the flood dragon and crashed into it. It was the coiling dragon palm. The flood dragon was injured and spouted blood. It had been caught off guard by this long dragon. Roar! The flood dragon roared repeatedly. It tried to break free a few times, but was blocked by the blood slave every single time. The blood slave was under the siege of several semi-sage experts. However, it wasn't afraid. It was relying on the toughness of its body that was granted to it by the Star Colossus genes. It wasn't afraid of its flesh being torn off in a head-on combat. Anyway, it wasn't afraid of death since it was condensed from a soul and was only a small fraction of the whole. Bang! The blood slave's body exploded and scattered. However, its body reorganized itself again. This was the most dreadful ability of the blood slave. It was immortal. It could continue to respawn as long as there were enough spirit dawn to support that. This was why the Devil King had condensed an army of blood slaves, so that he could rule the devil world. And that was why Yi Shiwen wanted to condense a blood slave. It could deal with the occasional enemies that he himself couldn't. The experts were very depressed at this sight. They couldn't do anything to defeat it. They had basically been tied down by the blood slave. They had no way out of there. Hence, they posed no danger to Yi Shiwen even though he wasn't too far from there. However, Yi Shiwen wouldn't allow the blood slave to face the enemies endlessly. The blood slave could certainly respawn as long as there were enough spirit dawn. However, Yi Shiwen had to burn 50 million spirit dawn for merely condensing a blood slave of semi-sage realm. Therefore, he couldn't support the respawns of a blood slave several times with the leftover spirit dawn. Crash bang! The heavenly tribulation penetrated through the heavy water and bombarded Yi Xiwen's body. To be continued, translator's thoughts. Chapter 387. Damn it! This bastard is crossing the tribulation. Everyone could clearly see that Yi Shiwen was the real mastermind behind all this, and not the blood slave. He wasn't far away from them. He was clad in the warrior attire of the Fire Cloud Cave. Shi Ming was particularly burning with anger, since this person was clad in the attire of the Fire Cloud Cave. He must have mixed with the team of Fire Cloud Cave and followed Shi Ming here. Shi Ming couldn't tolerate the fact that he hadn't noticed that. Furthermore, he didn't even recognize this person. Yi Shiwen had once again changed his appearance. Therefore, Shi Ming didn't know that this person was Yi Shiwen. Shi Ming was preoccupied with rage since he was blaming himself for being negligent. Yi Shiwen didn't know that someone was going mad because of him. Right now, he was sitting cross-legged and could feel the power seething inside his body. The lightning in the sky struck again and again. The lighting rushed down and appeared to be capable of seeing. It didn't spread out in the water and aimed straight towards Yi Shiwen to strike him. The lightning struck Yi Xiwen's body and caused his real elemental energy to boil even more. However, he knew that it was just an appetizer. Waves and waves of numerous lightning figures crashed down from above before Yi Shiwen could catch his breath. And they struck towards Yi Shiwen. Shi Ming, Pan Shui Rong, Ingda, and the Flood Dragon were present nearby. They were dumbstruck upon witnessing this scene. They couldn't help but think that the heaven was furious, and had sent its heavenly forces to render punishment. An ordinary heavenly tribulation was scary enough, let alone this variant of heavenly tribulation. An ordinary variant of heavenly tribulation was scary enough to kill an average expert. And this one was clearly an abnormal variant. These people hadn't heard about this kind of heavenly tribulation. Such an abnormal heavenly tribulation only existed in ancient books. Yet, now they were witnessing one with their own eyes. This was simply mind-boggling. The groups of lightning figures swept down from the sky. They appeared to be surfing on waves. They appeared extremely terrifying. These lightning figures rushed straight towards Yi Shiwen like ferocious evil spirits. This was the type of heavenly tribulation everyone was afraid of, because facing a tribulation was like taking a test, and most people did that with inadequate preparation. Hence, they weren't capable enough to cross such a heavenly tribulation. Only an outstanding genius with deep foundation could cross it. For others, it was no different than a deadly tribulation. Yi Shiwen might not have outstanding innate talent. However, his foundation was very profound. He had deliberately restrained his cultivation level over the past 2 years in order to build this deep foundation. Even so, Yi Shiwen didn't dare to look down on this heavenly tribulation one bit. He might suffer a crushing defeat if he were to take this terrifying heavenly tribulation lightly. Yi Shiwen sneered. He rushed up and burst into the crowd of lightning figures like a golden streamer of light. These lightning figures didn't constitute of just lightning apes. Various other kinds of demons were also present in this group. Some had taken human forms, but still retained several characteristics of the demon race. They rushed towards Yi Shiwen as they brandished their weapons. Die! Those lightning people bellowed loudly as they rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Each one of them was armed with sword, spears, clubs, and all other sorts of weapons. The martial arts unleashed by these lightning people were far more tyrannical than the martial arts of the barbarian experts of Legendary's great complete realm. The lightning people formed small teams as they rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. Each unit had enormous might. Yi Shiwen roared. A Hanzhan seal smashed down from above. The giant mountain fell from the sky like a huge dragon and smashed down. Many of the lightning people didn't get a chance to begin their attack and were smashed by Yi Zaiwen's Hanzhan seal. They transformed into a group of lightning energy and were absorbed by Yi Shiwen. The universe inside Yi Zaiwen's Dantian made a crackling sound after it absorbed the lightning energy. Yi Shiwen, who now wore 5 layers of tyrant body technique, broke into the crowd of lightning people in one fell swoop and went all out. He shot the fire cloud sky falling hand and didn't hold back one bit. His blazing big hand rushed forth like a bunch of red clouds and grabbed a bunch of lightning people. They then got crushed and exploded. Shi Jiming's complexion turned ashen as he watched this scene from the sidelines. He knew that his comprehension of fire cloud sky falling hand was far inferior to Yi Zaiwen's. Yet, somehow, this attack had reminded him of the attack that Yi Shiwen had displayed. However, this man was very different from Yi Shiwen, whether the comparison was drawn based on appearance, physical characteristics, or aura. He could only blame his luck for encountering 2 experts whose comprehensions of the fire cloud sky falling hand was superior to his own. And he had encountered them within such a short time frame. However, he didn't hold himself back and continued to attack the blood slave. He and the other semi-sage experts were no fools. They knew that the blood slave could respawn only to some extent, not limitlessly. Wouldn't taking endless rebirths go against the heaven's will? The blood slave was certainly operating by consuming some kind of energy. So, they only needed to exhaust it thoroughly. That would automatically bring an end to this fight. Moreover, this must be done before Yi Shiwen was done crossing the heavenly tribulation. Then, they could kill Yi Shiwen by taking advantage of his weak condition post-tribulation. A person who could cross such a dreadful heavenly tribulation had to be genuinely talented and intrepid. He couldn't be allowed to live. He would be exhausted after crossing this heavenly tribulation, and it would be their big chance to get rid of him. Bang! Ingdas divine eagle grabbed the blood slave in its claws and smashed it. Yi Shiwen couldn't see or hear them, but he knew their intentions. Both sides wanted to dispose of their respective opponents quickly. Yi Shiwen continued to slaughter those lightning people. Each of these lightning people was as strong as an expert of Legendary's great complete realm. However, they weren't a match for Yi Shiwen. It wouldn't be an overstatement to say that it was rare to find an opponent of Yi Shiwen on the same level in the entire world. He was basically invincible on his level. Moreover, he possessed the formidable gilded tyrant form that made him an even more tyrannical opponent. He rushed into the group of lightning people. He simply disregarded the lightning attacks being launched at him. He grabbed a lightning person with his hand and crushed it. He then absorbed its energy. His strength increased a bit as a result. Yi Shiwen continued to become stronger. Moreover, he didn't stop here. Rather, he started doing two things at once. On one hand, he grabbed many lightning people and crushed them. On the other hand, he began to control his real elemental energy to capture the principles in his vicinity. He then started to condense them. He wasn't doing this for the first time. He had done this prior to condensing the blood slave. So, it was a child's play for him now. It was uncertain how many principles were captured by him. However, he managed to condense the first Tao principle inside his body. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's aura suddenly began to change after he condensed the first Tao principle. He finally experienced his first qualitative change. The innumerable changes in the past had only been quantitative in nature. It seemed as if an endless amount of water had finally broken through the dam. Yi Zaiwen's body began to entangle the coercion of Sage Realm. It was merely the coercion of semi-Sage level. However, there was certainly a huge difference when compared to earlier. This was the beginning of his transcendence of mortal world, a mere step towards becoming a sage. Shi Jiming, Pan Shui Rong, and Ingda were in utter shock when they saw that Yi Shiwen had begun to condense principles. They couldn't believe their eyes. They were quite convinced that Yi Shiwen hadn't even reached half-step legendary 9th stage yet. Even the extremely profound experts of Legendary's great complete realm would face great difficulties in condensing principles. They themselves had experienced this in the past, and knew of the challenges that lay in the path. After all, they had also walked on the same path. The most shocking thing for them wasn't that Yi Shiwen was condensing principles. Rather, the most shocking was the fact that he was doing it without even reaching half-step legendary 9th stage. Their eyes popped out as they watched this happen in front of them. They were blown away by this. There was always a certain relation between one's cultivation level and strength, but it wasn't absolute. Yi Shiwen possessed the fighting strength of Legendary's great complete realm, even though he was merely at half-step legendary 8th stage. Yet this wasn't that surprising. However, condensing the principles of semi-sage realm at such a lower level was definitely equivalent to going against the heaven's will. The stages were like floors in a building. A person could see everything on the floor they were on. However, a person on the bottom floor would never understand the feeling of overlooking the earth from high up in the sky. Yi Shiwen was clearly a person who had never left the ground. Yet, he seemed to know the feeling of overlooking the earth from the sky. Yi Zaiwen's actions and agility skill got imbued with fluctuating world principles as he condensed more and more of them. Now, each and every movement of his carried the power of the world. Those lightning people didn't stand a chance against him. He slapped the large group of lightning people with his fire cloud sky falling hand and killed them all in one shot. As Yi Zaiwen's speed of annihilating the lightning people grew more and more, those semi-sage experts as well as the Flood Dragon became more and more anxious. That was because they were witnessing the birth of a miracle. Yi Shiwen was unceasingly condensing the principles within his body. He quickly surpassed the preliminary stage of semi-sage realm by condensing 100 Tao principles. However, he continued. Soon he had condensed 110, 120, and then he finally crossed the 200 mark. Now, he had closed the gap between himself and these experts. However, they felt their hairs standing on end when they saw Yi Shiwen condense more principles after the 200 mark. To think that such a terrifying expert was present among them, one who could continuously comprehend more than 200 principles, and that too in one go. God only knows how much effort these people had to put to condense 200 principles. But Yi Shiwen didn't stop. 220. 250. Hurry, let's get out of here. Shi Ming shouted loudly. He couldn't bear the pressure on his heart and turned around to escape. They'd end up dead if they waited until the full promotion of Yi Zaiwen's strength, since his power would have increased beyond their imagination by then. Not to mention that Yi Shiwen would have the Blood Slave support. The other few experts, as well as the Flood Dragon, turned around to escape after they heard Shi Ming shout. Want to run away? It's too late for that. A tyrannical aura, which clearly surpassed the initial stage of semi-sage realm, swept in the surroundings. To be continued. Chapter 388. Want to run away? It's too late for that. A sneering sound came from Yi Zaiwen's mouth. His aura exploded and surged to an exceptionally terrifying extent. Yi Shiwen had condensed about 300 Tao principles inside his body. Thanks to that, his fighting strength had reached the intermediate stage of semi-sage realm. As a result, he had enough fighting strength to stand against the experts who were at the peak of the initial stage of semi-sage realm. Yi Shiwen shot his fire cloud sky falling hand to stop those people from escaping. It formed a mysterious red cloud. It was a lot more exquisite than the one displayed by the Blood Slave. Yi Zaiwen's fire cloud sky falling hand had obtained enough energy and essence that it could easily split the mountains. His flaming hand advanced towards that divine eagle to grab it. The divine eagle couldn't evade Yi Zaiwen's attack, even after putting all its effort. So, it screamed loudly as it attempted to counter the attack. Its golden wings began to emanate golden rays of light in the surroundings. Its wings flapped several times and unleashed an overwhelming golden beam. The golden beam rushed forth to tackle Yi Zaiwen's fire cloud sky falling hand. Ingda naturally couldn't bear to see that his pet was going to be caught by Yi Shiwen. So, he quickly turned around and brandished his long blade. The blade energy shattered the space as it went towards Yi Zaiwen's attack. It collided with Yi Zaiwen's attack. It seemed as if a meteor had crashed into the earth. The terrifying power unleashed by the collision cracked the space open, inch by inch. Bang! 2 attacks of semi-sage realm had swept out in the surroundings at once. The energy released from the attacks pierced through the mountains and rivers as they crashed straight into Yi Zaiwen's fire cloud sky falling hand. The fire cloud sky falling hand vibrated frantically after it had faced the 2 terrifying attacks at once. Yi Shiwen coldly snorted and pumped more power into his attack. As a result, his blazing hand started to turn more and more golden in color. "Huh!" Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. He grabbed the golden beam and the blade energy simultaneously. They started to boil and seethe within the grasp of his fire cloud sky falling hand. Bang! The golden beam and the blame energy were crushed and got annihilated. Then, the fire cloud sky falling hand advanced forward and grabbed that divine eagle without any delay. "Don't do it!" Ingda roared. He released startling blade energy. It pierced its way through the heavy water and rushed towards the fire cloud sky falling hand to chop it down. However, it was too late. Bang! The giant stature of that divine eagle was ruptured because it was crushed by the fire cloud sky falling hand. It could only scream before its blood splashed out. In the end, it got turned into a mass of blood fog. "No, you bastard!" Ingda felt his heart shatter when he saw his several hundred-years-old companion getting crushed to death. His body turned into a streamer of light, and he suddenly arrived in front of Yi Shiwen to kill him. Varied sword secrets. Yi Shiwen let out a cold shout. He congealed a startling sword intention in his hand and brandished it horizontally. The sword intention forged its way ahead. It appeared as if a long dragon was flying across the sky. Poochie! Ingda's blade energy got defeated by the sword intention. Then his entire body was chopped down into pieces by the sword intention. He died on the spot. Pan Shui Rong, Shi Ming, and that flood dragon were extremely frightened when they saw 2 semi-sage realm powerhouses being effortlessly slaughtered by Yi Shiwen. They rushed upward towards the water surface with all their strength. How could Yi Shiwen let them escape? He had chosen to cross the heavenly tribulation in the water, mainly because he would have had to face several hundred experts of Legendary's great complete realm along with these semi-sage experts if he had crossed it on the surface. So, how could he possibly allow them to escape? Yi Shiwen sent the Blood Slave to stop the Flood Dragon, while he personally chased after 100 Barbarians Cave's Pan Shui Rong to kill her. Pan Shui Rong panicked when she saw Yi Shiwen chase after her. She quickly turned around and pointed her fingers towards him. Her huge fingers extended towards Yi Shiwen, one by one. It seemed as if a god had descended into the mortal world to destroy it. The fingers shattered the space wherever they went. It seemed as if the world itself was about to disintegrate into pieces. Yi Shiwen immediately recognized this attack. It was a martial art of a small guarding faction of the 100 Barbarians Cave. It was called 100 Barbarians Lu Run Fingers 1. Even a finger could break the world. It was said that this terrifying technique had emerged from the barbarian god's finger technique. It was also said that the barbarian god had once destroyed half of the world with this technique. Yi Shiwen shot his fire cloud sky falling hand once again. It struck those huge pointy fingers. The fingers simply weren't a match for the fire cloud sky falling hand. Bang! 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 The fire cloud sky falling hand grabbed those huge fingers and exploded them. The power of the finger attack wasn't inferior to the power of fire cloud sky falling hand. However, Pan Shui Rong's skill was far less than Yi Shiwen's. Yi Shiwen had also learned the method of executing the 100 Barbarians' Lu Run fingers from the memory of the deceased disciples of 100 Barbarians Cave. However, Yi Shiwen was dressed up as a disciple of the Fire Cloud Cave, so he didn't display a power technique of the 100 Barbarians Cave. Pan Shui Rong's fingers were crushed by Yi Shiwen, one by one. She couldn't evade Yi Shiwen's attack and got slaughtered. He plundered all her wealth from her corpse. Yi Shiwen didn't show her a shred of mercy, even though she was a woman. Yi Shiwen rushed towards Shi Ming after he had killed Pan Shui Rong. Shi Ming had escaped towards the water surface by now. Shi Ming convulsed with fear as he saw Yi Shiwen approach closer. He shouted, "No! You can't kill me. Otherwise my father won't spare you. Your father won't find out about this." Yi Shiwen sneered. A Hanzon seal fell from above like a huge dragon. It caught Shi Ming off guard, smashed his body, and thrust him to the bottom of the pond. The bones in his body had been crushed. Generally, the barbarians had more robust bodies than the people of Southern Region. However, none were on par with Yi Shiwen. Bang! Yi Shiwen used Fire Cloud Sky Falling Hand and slapped Shi Ming to death. His body turned into a group of blood fog. Then, Yi Shiwen plundered his wealth as well. The wealth of these semi-sage experts was on an entirely different level when compared to that on the bodies of the experts of Legendary's great complete realm, since they were considered as elites among elites in their respective martial arts schools. So, they were bound to have several treasures on their bodies. However, there were no Spirit Dawn on their bodies. Rather, they had possessed Primary Spirit Dawn too. A Primary Spirit Dan was refined from the Spirit Dawn. First, the spirit energy was extracted from the Spirit Dawn. It was then compressed to a great extent and then further condensed to form Primary Spirit Dawn. It was impossible for the experts below Semi-Sage Realm to condense these high-quality Dawn. It could be said that spirit energy was the smallest unit of energy which was accessible to the experts below Semi-Sage Realm. Only those experts who had condensed the principles of Semi-Sage Realm or above were capable of condensing Primary Spirit Dawn. 10,000 Spirit Dawn were required to condense one Primary Spirit Dan. The experts of Semi-Sage Realm or higher used to deal in Primary Spirit Dawn only. Otherwise, if they dealt in Spirit Dawn with each other, then the number of Spirit Dawn in an average transaction would reach astronomical figures. Yi Shiwen had obtained more than 20,000 Primary Spirit Dawn from the bodies of these experts. It was a big fortune for him. The wealth of legendary experts was nothing in comparison to that of these semi-sage experts. That too when the comparison was drawn solely on the basis of Primary Spirit Dawn, and not adding the other exotic treasures and magic weapons in their possession. Yi Shiwen rushed towards that flood dragon after he had killed Shi Ming. He sneered since there was one around to interfere. The flood dragon collapsed under Yi Shiwen and the blood slave's pincer attack. However, Yi Shiwen didn't turn its corpse in a blood fog. Instead, he left its corpse intact and stored it in his stock. The flood dragon's entire body was covered with treasures. The dragon's blood could be used to nourish and harvest rare herbal medicines. Yi Shiwen began to operate the restraining breath technique after he had killed the flood dragon, and his appearance transformed into that of Shi Ming's. He sneered and received the blood slave back. Then, he rushed out of the deep and cold pond like a streamer of light. The disciples of all three forces were anxiously waiting at the shore of the pond. However, they hadn't dared to jump into the cold pond. A few impatient disciples had dived into the pond, but had been frozen to death. Diving into this pond was like committing suicide for an expert below the semi-sage realm. But Yi Shiwen was an exception, thanks to his gilded tyrant form. Moreover, the sudden arrival of the heavenly tribulation had scared them. The appearance of all types of lightning figures had terrified them even more. They hadn't come across such a terrifying heavenly tribulation in the past. Such an abnormal tribulation would appear only for a monster who had dared to go against the heavens' will. Otherwise, the heavens would never be so unfair as to send such a dreadful heavenly tribulation. That was because the one facing it would have little to no chance of survival. Forget about witnessing a tribulation like this one. They hadn't even heard about something like this. It was an extremely scary spectacle. They were very worried because they might have to face a one-sided massacre if their leader didn't win. Young Master Sure, several experts of the Fire Cloud Cave shouted in joy as they saw Yi Shiwen emerge from the pond. Yi Shiwen nodded blankly. He then said, "Let's get back to the Fire Cloud Cave." "Wait, Shi Ming, where is our Miss Pan?" The warriors of the 100 Barbarians Cave didn't hold back. They blocked Yi Ziwen's path. "You guys are courting death. Do you want to meet her?" Yi Shiwen shouted coldly. His eyes flashed with killing intent as he continued to pretend being Shi Ming. A fire cloud sky falling hand appeared and swept towards them for the kill. The 100 Barbarians Cave and Fire Cloud Cave were mortal enemies. It was fairly natural for a deadly fight to break out between them. Bang! These experts of Legendary's Great Complete Realm couldn't evade Yi Ziwen's attack. They were reduced to a mass of flesh and blood by Yi Shiwen. There was no comparison between Yi Ziwen's strength and theirs even before he had jumped into the pond. Let alone now, when he had condensed about 300 principles. Yi Shiwen killed them all in the blink of an eye. Over 200 warriors of 100 Barbarians Cave had been slaughtered. The experts of the Eagle Cave were shocked by this scene. They were deterred by this and didn't dare to advance forward. Provoking this vicious fiend would be tantamount to courting death. Suddenly, a bad feeling emerged inside their hearts. Inga should have arrived by now, if he was alive, but he hadn't. On the contrary, Yi Shiwen had. This clearly meant that Shi Ming had won the fight over the sunflower water essence, and Ingda must died. They wouldn't dare to provoke Yi Shiwen, for they didn't wish to face the same fate as their leader. Yi Shiwen didn't say anything since he saw the scared faces of the warriors of the Eagle Cave. They were basically speechless. He left with the other disciples of the Fire Cloud Cave. He spared the lives of the Eagle Cave warriors and allowed them go so that they could spread the news that Shi Ming had killed Pan Shui Rou. This would deepen the hatred between these two forces, and that would reduce the threat to the southern region. To be continued. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.